Hello guys, this is your friend and we are back with a new fanfic part 4. Which is what if Temari walks into Konoha with the fate of Suna on her shoulders part 4. And if you enjoy this fanfic then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. And now let's start the fanfic. Temari's eye twitched. She should have expected such an outcome. She should have known that nothing normal would come of this. Even so, here she was, arms crossed and frown on her face as she glared down at the smug expression looking up at her. Oh, how Temari wished she could wipe that look off Naruto's stupid face, with her foot. It's only been a week, she mumbled under her breath. She rolled her eyes as Naruto's smug smirk never left his face. Show me again. Naruto didn't need to be told twice, immediately picking up a random rock off the ground next to him and enclosing it in his fist. Temari watched intently as he channeled his chakra into the rock, harnessing his natural affinity for earth and putting it to work at crushing and grinding the rock down into a fine powder. This was the first step in earth-nature manipulation training. While with wind, the focus was on cutting, earth was much more direct. The task she had set for him had been simple enough. Grind the rock down into a fine powder. Temari had expected it to take weeks for him to get close to that stage. She was sorely mistaken. Within a few minutes Naruto opened his hand to reveal a palm full of dust, enough so that a portion of it blew away with the faint breeze. Temari narrowed her eyes. And the next step, without a word Naruto placed his other hand over the top of the dust and focused. The first step of earth manipulation was about breaking things down, the second was about building them back up. To reshape a landscape, one had to break its current form and then rebuild as required. That was the principle of most basic earth jutsu. Channeling his chakra into a grinding force was all good and well, but if Naruto couldn't also harness the compacting nature of earth, then he wouldn't get very far. Nevertheless, mere seconds later, he lifted his hand to reveal a small stone in the shape of a sphere that he then placed on the ground next to 3 others just like it. Well shit, Temari muttered. That's not even remotely fair. It had taken her years to master her own elemental nature to the level it was at now. Hell, she only had elemental nature training so young because of her standing as the Kage's daughter. Had Temari been a normal shinobi, she would likely only just be getting onto the subject. And here was Naruto, with no prior knowledge on the matter, making the first steps of the process look like child's play. The world was cruel and twisted place indeed. With a sigh Temari dropped her frown and smiled. Jealousy would do her no good, and besides, this was her husband she was being jealous of. His accomplishments were her accomplishments, and vice versa. Damn, that feels weird to say, she thought to herself. It had only been just over a week since they were officially married, so it came as no surprise that actually referring to the blonde before her as her husband would still feel a little odd for some time to come. Still, Temari wasn't about to avoid the title, just as she made sure Naruto didn't avoid referring to her as his wife. They were not going to be ashamed of their union, no matter what, of that Temari would make certain. What's next? Naruto asked curiously, looking up somewhat eagerly at Temari. Well, I'm not entirely sure, Temari admitted. I only knew the beginning stages of the elemental training for Earth because of my brothers. Kankuro chose not to develop his any further and focused on puppetry, while Gaara has the Aikibi and didn't exactly need any training to do what he does. They had tried to look in the Konoha library for more, but it became apparent rather quickly that such things were not available to genin without a sensei's approval. Not to mention that such training was usually closely guided by a jonin. There were a lot of deadly mistakes that could be made when messing with nature and its forces. Perhaps you should ask your sensei for advice. Naruto frowned at that, clearly not wanting to deal with Kakashi if he could help it. What was the next step for wind? He asked. Temari sat down and picked up one of the smooth spherical stones Naruto had created and pinched it between her finger and thumb. A quick burst of her chakra split the stone perfectly down the middle, one half falling to the ground as she held onto the other. First step of wind is to cut. Most start with something soft, like paper, or a leaf, maybe even fabric. From there you can move on to harder materials, rocks, coins, steel if you really want the challenge. This first step of the training is all about making sure you can harness your elemental affinity more than anything else. Next is to try and give it volume with what you have. For wind, that means either cutting something really big, or pushing something with wind, she explained. To prove her point, Temari molded her chakra into her hand and thrust an open palm out to her side, a gust of wind flattening the GR in that direction and launching the half a stone like a kunai across the way and into the trunk of a nearby tree. You've got the nature down, so next step is giving it volume and putting it into practice. After that comes shaping it into usable jutsu, and that part you will definitely need help with, unless you want to around for months trying to figure out how to create your own jutsu. Naruto looked contemplative as he glanced around. Any suggestions? Temari hummed thoughtfully. I guess you could try just shifting some earth around. Make some different shapes. Try and break things down faster and break down bigger pieces. Other than that, just keep doing what you're doing, she said. It's a lot like chakra control training. It doesn't actually matter what you're doing, as long as it's offering a challenge and you're improving. Repeating the same steps over and over will only help you refine that particular skill and aspect of the manipulation. Naruto grimaced at the mention of chakra control. Great, he drawled. More control exercises. Wordlessly, he made a single hand seal and spawned a tiny army of clones that took off silently into the forest. What was that about? My clones return the memories when they dispel. Setting them up to do chakra control and elemental manipulation training works to increase the rate I can learn it. Since this training is all based on knowledge and feeling as opposed to physical requirements that I have to do myself, Naruto explained with a shrug. Temari's eyes narrowed dangerously. You've been using this little trick to speed through your earth nature training. Naruto nodded. I don't have time to sit around for weeks repeating the same thing. I have a lot of chakra, so it takes a lot of control to get things right. Anything that helps me speed that along is getting used. You smug little bastard. Temari screamed internally. How dare he cheat? It had taken her years to refine her chakra control and elemental resonance. Why should Naruto get to abuse a jutsu and cut the suffering and time down? It wasn't fair. I hate you. Noted, Naruto said, unbothered. Such a cute display of young love, Kakashi said, appearing suddenly beside the two. It is good to see you two are helping each other train and improve. A union such as yours is only as strong as the weakest half, so it would be wise to keep each other close in strength and skill, as well as body and soul. Temari rolled her eyes, Naruto doing much the same. That would be a great sentiment if she wasn't the one doing all the training right now. Not that she thought there was much Naruto could teach her. Maybe she could pester him to teach her that fancy clone technique. What are you doing here, Kakashi? Naruto asked. The Jonin smiled with his one eye. Can I not pay my student a friendly visit? He asked innocently. I have not seen you since the ceremony, so I thought it would be good to drop in and congratulate the new couple. There was an uncomfortable few seconds of silence as the two blondes stared at him, unimpressed and not buying his bullshit in the slightest. Also, we have a mission. There it is. Temari sighed as she stood up and went to leave. Well, you guys have fun with that, she said. I'll be here when you get back. You're coming too, Kakashi said cheerfully, earning surprised looks from the couple. The Hokage cleared it. Since we don't have anyone currently available who can take you on, and new genin cells won't be going into circulation for some time to come, it was decided to add you to my team. It keeps you and Naruto close and looks good having you under my protection. Two birds and all that. Oh, cool, I guess, Temari said, idly touching one of her trench knives that was strapped to her thigh. She was still a little unsure about going out on a mission without a battle fan, but it seemed she didn't have much of a choice. When do we leave? Kakashi shrugged. Tomorrow morning. We have time, and I'm sure you would like to say goodbye to your brothers before we leave. They are still in the village, aren't they? Temari nodded and turned to Naruto. I'll be back a little later, she said. Need anything while I'm gone? Naruto shook his head. I'm good. Take your time. I'll pack a bag for you while I'm going, he said, waving her off. Kakashi watched Temari take off before turning an all too happy expression at his student. How the man managed to show so much expression with only a single visible eye was anyone's guess. Probably genjutsu. Packing her back for her, Such a gentleman, he said. Who'd have thought all it would take to finally break through to you was a pretty girl? Kakashi, Naruto growled warningly. My dear little student, Finally succumbing to the allure of the finer, Kakashi continued, wiping a non-existent tear from his eye. I'm so proud. Naruto's glare could have set water on fire. I will kill you. One day. I promise. Kakashi didn't falter, already aspiring to usurp your sensei. So ambitious, he said. Then his expression shifted, and he looked at Naruto seriously. Make sure to pack well. We will possibly be gone for an extended period. Go and see the Hokage first. He and Lord Jiraiya need to speak with you about a personal matter before we can leave. His glance towards the boy's stomach at the word, personal, was not missed. As suddenly as he had appeared, Kakashi was gone, leaving Naruto to his own thoughts. They aren't going to tighten the seal again, are they? I do not know, the fox said. If they do, do not fight it. We do not need them sticking their noses any further into what they shouldn't. Complete the mission, alleviate their fears, and in time we will regain what was taken. Naruto looked down at the spheres of earth he had shaped. Is this what you meant when you said my affinity wasn't important? He had been confused when the Kyuubi had claimed as much, but now, as he confirmed manipulating elemental chakra came almost naturally to him, he had to wonder what the true meaning of the fox's words were. He was grateful to Temari for helping to get him started. It was just a good thing she hadn't caught on to his clone trick earlier. The last thing he wanted was for anyone to find out he had sent several batches of clones into the forest of death to practice with every element. Temari, among many others, would lose their minds if they found out he had almost mastered the basics of 2 elements in less than a week. The very world bends to my will, boy. As my vessel, you too have access to such abilities, even if it is to a lesser extent, the fox said. Should you learn to properly harness my power, the use of your kind's pitiful ninjutsu will be beneath you. Such is the blessing of being my Jinchuriki. Picking up one of the spheres, he made it crumble into dust once more before reforming it into a rounded cube. Edges were a little harder to shape apparently. Leaving his training for the moment, Naruto headed to the Hokage's office to get what was likely going to be another uncomfortable conversation over with quickly. Unbeknownst to him, 3 eyes watched over not only him, but his clones as well. Hiruzen hummed thoughtfully as he deactivated the spying crystal ball and tucked it away in his desk. Care to weigh in? He asked, turning to Danzo curiously. His potential can no longer be ignored, the bandaged elder said. If this is the progress he is capable of making in such short time, without full access to the Kyuubi's chakra, then we would be fools to not step in and ensure such natural talent is not wasted. No one has been known to take so naturally to the art of elemental manipulation since you and young Hatake. My thoughts exactly, Hiruzen mumbled, stroking his chin. Kakashi is spread too thin among his students. We need him to focus on Sasuke for the time being. While I've no doubt he would be the best choice for teaching Naruto the further steps in elemental ninjutsu, there is only so much we can burden on Kakashi. I'm sure you already have some schemes for how to handle this. Danzo ignored the jab. A few, he said. Kakashi must remain focused on the Uchiha, of that we can both agree. His Sharingan must be trained to full maturity. The Haruno girl can easily be ped off to any capable Jonin. From her records, she has neither the natural talent nor mindset to attempt to focus on anything in particular. I can offer one of my own to take her out of the equation easily enough. Perhaps she can still be made into something useful. The Hokage grumbled quietly at his old friend's disregard for the young girl on Team 7. Sakura may not have shown much promise outside of the academy, but she was still a budding young shinobi of Konoha. She was loyal and brave, and that was all the raw qualities Hiruzen could hope of anyone serving the village. Still, Danzo had a good point. It was pointless to waste too many recourses on the girl if she wasn't going to focus herself. And what of Temari and Naruto? He asked. Jiraiya would be best suited to training the boy, he intends on upholding any sense of responsibility for him, Danzo said simply. Unless you wish to take an interest in pinning down any of your own knowledge again. I'm certain even in your current state, there is no one better suited to teach and guide someone to master the 5 elements. Naruto can learn all 5 with as much ease, Hiruzen said before looking to Danzo to continue. The matter of Naruto was all but settled anyway. He had only asked to get a possible new point of view. The real question laid in how they were going to deal with Temari's training and positioning within Konoha. I can handle the Suna girl personally. Oh, and why such the vested interest? Danzo smirked. Not even you or your son are as knowledgeable on wind-style jutsu as I am, he stated proudly. She is outside of wind country. Without proper guidance, there is only so far she can go by herself. If we expect her to keep up with the Jinchuriki, she will need to be trained accordingly. I can accommodate this, as well as her mental training. From what she experienced growing up, what with her brother's condition and actions, she has a respectable fortitude. It would take little effort to mold her into Jonin material. Hiruzen chuckled. It had been a long time since someone had piqued Danzo's interest quite like that. True, there weren't many who could grow up with a murderous Jinchuriki as a sibling and come out of it as well put together as Temari seemed. That didn't mean the old Sarutobi was going to let Danzo run without restraint on the matter. You understand that your usual methods are strictly off limits with her, yes? I am not a fool, Sarutobi, Danzo said. The girl will be safe. Good. I will discuss further action with Jiraiya when he returns. Danzo's lone eyes wandered down to the mission scroll sitting on the desk between them. Are you sure it is wise to allow them to make such a bold request? He asked. You know as well as I the likelihood of it being a trap. Hiruzen nodded in agreement, which is exactly why Team 7 will not be going alone, he said. If I might borrow some of your more stealth-orientated Anbu, I would be most grateful. Consider it done, the elder said, tapping his cane as he stood. If by some miracle this is not a deception, then it can only prove to benefit us more than them. As his old teammate bid him farewell and left him to wait for Naruto's arrival, Hiruzen could only hope that he wasn't sending a group of young shinobi into what could be the start of another war. What are you playing at, you old fence-sitter? He thought to himself, staring at the symbol stamped clearly on the side of the mission scroll. The seal of the Tsuchikage. Here. Temari let out a surprised yelp as something heavy was dropped unceremoniously in her lap by her brother. Glaring up at a smug Kankuro, she made a note to remind him who was the tougher sibling later, turning her attention quickly to the large bundle of cloth now in her arms. Unwrapping it quickly, her eyes widened. Kankuro did his best to look uninterested. Not the flashiest, but it'll do until you can afford something better, he said in a bored tone. Just don't go breaking this one too, 'cause I ain't forking out for another one anytime soon. You got that? Ah, I knew you were a big softy. Come here, Temari said, setting the new battle fan to the side as she stood up and walked towards her brother with open arms. Oi, stay back, Kankuro yelled, running away from the embrace. None of that crap. Ahem. Baki cleared his throat. Temari laughed at Kankuro and went to take her seat again. She would get that hug eventually. Now Temari would have to keep her eyes open for a puppet to add to his collection. Fair was fair after all. So, you don't know where you will be getting sent? Her sensei asked worriedly. Not yet, Temari answered. I just know it will be out of the village. Who knows how long? Kakashi implied you guys wouldn't be here by the time we got back, so I guess it'll be a week at least. It should have bothered her to not have any real information about the upcoming mission, but Temari was mostly just happy to finally get back out of the village. Konoha was a lovely place, but not the sort of place she wanted to spend all of her time. She was a shinobi. Having the chance to travel around was supposed to be part of the package. Temari desperately needed something to do, a way to stretch her legs and ensure her skills weren't getting dull. Thankfully, she wasn't being forgotten about in that respect. Baki handed some scrolls to Temari. Some wind jutsu from Suna's archives. All permitted by the council. Consider it a parting gift from the village, he said. Should you need anything further to progress your skills, you need only ask. I am sure your requests would not go ignored. Temari accepted them gratefully and tucked them away in her pouch. Thank you, she said. Would you like to get something to eat with me? One final meal before we go our separate ways. I can't guarantee how long it will be until we all see each other again. She took a moment to look around curiously. Is Gaara around? PFF'd. Gaara is just being Gaara, Kankuro scoffed. He's around, but we haven't seen much of him lately. No one's been dying, so I guess that's good enough. Has he been okay? Temari asked. Perhaps it is best you don't concern yourself with him, Baki said, trying to steer away from the topic of the youngest sibling. Let us go and eat. Temari didn't get much of a chance to argue as her brother and sensei made an effort to move the day along. As they left and the door closed behind them, Gaara silently climbed in through the window, staring intently in the direction his team, his family, had gone. She loves you. Naruto's words still lingered in his mind, as they had every day since their meeting. The redhead had kept his distance, observing both his sister and fellow Jinchuriki over the past days. In spite of all the time the two spent together, it was clear even to Gaara that there was no love between them. It made him wonder if Naruto knew what he was talking about in the first place. Temari didn't love him. No one did. If they had, he would not be who he was today, he would not be where he was, as strong as he was. The Uzumaki had to be wrong. Gaara would find the truth soon enough. He just needed to catch Temari on her own and ask her himself. A plan that would be noticeably harder to accomplish now that she was leaving Konoha for a mission. He could wait. Kakashi had no idea what to expect when his team had been called in for a special mission request. It wasn't unexpected. He had quite the reputation, and even if he was acting as a sensei, there would still be plenty who would try and request him personally for a mission. So long as it didn't remove him from his team, or put said team in unnecessary danger, then it was fine. Kakashi had enough years and missions under his belt to know how to see a red flag of a mission from a mile away, Sharingan or not. So, it only made sense that when the scroll was finally handed to him, containing the details of not only the mission requested, but the client who had requested it, that all Kakashi saw was red flags. He trusted the Hokage, and sorely wished to uphold his reputation as an unquestioning, loyal shinobi. But he would be lying if he didn't admit that he hadn't thought of refusing the mission outright. If not on principle, then for the safety of his team. He had ended up accepting it, of course. Reservations aside, there weren't many options open to them, and Team 7 had been specifically requested for this. No one else could be sent, and outright rejecting the client could likely lead to as much of a bad outcome as whatever the mission itself could entail. Kakashi and the Hokage had no doubts that this request, from Iwa no less, was part of a much bigger scheme. Time wasn't on their side, so the only way to figure out what the other village was trying to do, was to run headfirst into it. Argument could be made that a genin team, even one led by Kakashi, had no place being requested for a diplomatic mission of such importance. But Iwa's request was firm and non-negotiable. Adding Temari to the mix made things slightly more comfortable. If this was a trap, Iwa would have to think twice about angering two major villages simultaneously. Not that such a thing had stopped them before. The threat of another skirmish breaking out over whatever this was hung over Kakashi's head the entire trip to the border of the Land of Fire. Thankfully, his team moved efficiently and silently, giving him plenty of time to think and plan for every possible scenario they could run into, as well as keep his senses focused on their surroundings. There was always the chance Iwa would ambush them during the travel and claim they never arrived. That does beg the question, what are they after? Kakashi thought to himself. Surely this wasn't some effort just to take him out. There had been plenty of better opportunities in the years since the last war to take him off the board. If Iwa still held a grudge after this much time, it would be impressive, if not a tad sad. His one eye glanced around at the four genin traveling with him. Perhaps this was what Iwa had been waiting for. Kakashi would be an easier target if he had to split his attention between survival and protection. Or maybe it was much simpler than that, he considered, his lone eye focusing on Sasuke. Kumo he could understand making a move for the Sharingan, but Iwa. They had never gone out of their way to chase bloodlines before. Why change now? It must have been something else. Kakashi was looking at it too closely. Once they finally reached the border, nestled in the point where the three countries, GR, Waterfall, and Earth met, they set up camp and waited as per instruction. Iwa had been clear about the Konoha team not stepping foot into their territory. They were expected to wait to receive the diplomatic party sent on behalf of the Tsuchikage himself. From there it would be anyone's guess as to how things progressed. And so, they waited, Kakashi doing his best to deal with a group of bored teenagers while keeping his fingers crossed that his bad luck wouldn't haunt them this time. Kakashi-sensei, Sakura began. What if this is a trap? Everyone turned their eyes to the Jonin, the same question likely circling their collective minds. Then we retreat, Kakashi answered simply. And if we can't? Sasuke asked bluntly. Kakashi wasn't sure if the young Uchiha was annoyed by the mission interfering with his training time, or excited at the prospect of having to fight their way out of enemy territory. Sasuke was always such a difficult child to read like that. I will cover our retreat. You all need only focus on getting back to Konoha. Hopefully it won't come to that. Despite our history, Konoha and Iwa have managed to maintain peace for some time now. While not outgoingly friendly, there is no reason to jump to the conclusion that they mean ill intent. Temari scoffed. You can't trust them, she said bitterly. Iwa is definitely up to something. Even if this mission goes smoothly, it'll just be a smaller piece to a bigger plan. They'll stab you in the back as soon as your guard is down. Kakashi couldn't outright disregard the blonde Kunoichi. If anyone knew of Iwa's deceit better than Konoha, it would be Suna, with Kiri following in a close third position. Iwa had done many things over the years to ostracize themselves from the other villages. It was for that reason alone that the Hokage wished to investigate the validity of their request. Any chance for peace would be thoroughly considered, no matter the history and blood between them. Still, Temari's words held some truth. Konoha may strive for peace, and Kakashi knew they would never let their guard down without good reason, especially after Orochimaru's invasion, but the possibility of deceit was never overlooked. Suna's recent actions had only further driven home that lesson. Like how you stabbed us in the back? Sasuke asked, glaring at Temari. Temari took the verbal jab in stride and smirked at the boy. Oh, you can talk. Or is it perhaps that you just feel safe speaking your mind all of a sudden due to a certain someone's absence? She asked with a knowing look, eyes flickering off in the direction they had seen Naruto leave. The blonde Jinchuriki had been the first to volunteer for night watch duty. As far as any of them knew, Naruto was simply establishing a perimeter. Temari, however, knew he was taking the opportunity to have some alone time. The Uchiha grunted and returned to his meal wordlessly. Thought so, Temari said. Honestly, I'm surprised we got this far. Definitely not Iwa's normal method of handling things. We should have been picked off miles from the border, leaving no traces that we even made it here. Then maybe the mission is legitimate, Sakura voiced hopefully. Temari shook her head. No, it's Iwa, she said firmly. They always have an angle to play. Perhaps, Kakashi said with a thoughtful hum. This isn't like them at all. But sometimes things happen. Circumstances change. People change. As safe as it may be to ignore the mission, on the off chance that they are being honest, and we refuse, then that will only serve to open old wounds even deeper than before. With a smile he handed around some small ration bars for everyone, making sure to hand Temari too. Trust is a dangerous thing. But to live without ever trusting can be more dangerous. Temari restrained herself from scowling as the Uchiha grunted and pointed another glare directly at her. I'll give this to Naruto, she muttered under her breath before leaving the safety of the group. Kakashi hung his head. Turning a disappointed eye to his disgruntled pupil, he sighed. Sasuke, no matter what happened during the invasion, there is no need to take it out on Temari, he explained. She was only following orders, much as she is now. I still can't believe her village have her doing that, Sakura said with clear revulsion. And with Naruto of all people. What was the Hokage thinking agreeing to such a thing? Are you questioning the wisdom of your Hokage, Sakura? Kakashi asked in amusement, smiling under his mask as the girl's eyes widened. Don't worry. Greater minds saw fit to allow the marriage to go ahead. We need only accept it and move on. As his team, we should try to be there for Naruto in this uncertain time, and Temari too. Sakura still maintained a displeased expression, but her eyes did twinkle ever so slightly at the mention of marriage. When exactly is the marriage? She asked carefully, no doubt wondering if she could play a part in the ceremony and learn more about the process for her own future special day. How bliss it must be to be a young girl with a wild imagination. Kakashi tiled his head in feigned innocence. Oh, did neither of them tell you? He asked. The marriage has already come and gone. Naruto and Temari have been officially wed for a little while now. The looks on his two students' faces was worth any headache this mission may cause him. Letting the silence hang in the air, Kakashi enjoyed watching their little minds run rampant at the revelation. Sasuke was as quick to drop the line of thought as he had picked it up, but Sakura's growing blush and constant glances towards the darkness beyond the trees was enough to tell him that at least one of his students wasn't a lost cause. It was little moments like this that were what being a sensei was all about. Sadly, it was as short-lived as it was amusing. The awkward silence of the group was broken by the loud snapping of a twig and a barely audible cursing. Kakashi kept his cool, Sakura and Sasuke quickly taking defensive positions with kunai in hand. He smiled. Time would teach them how to be more aware of their surroundings, as well as how to properly react to different situations. He had been aware of the small group surrounding them for a while now. Standard practice for Iwa shinobi, regardless of intentions. If they meant any harm, Kakashi knew there was nothing he or his team could do out here that would stop them, save for playing along and taking advantage of the enemy's own arrogance. It did help that Kakashi was uniquely aware of the route Anbu that had been following them from Konoha. If escape was necessary, he knew he would find himself grateful for the stance. For now, he was just happy that his little genin had good response times. I knew allowing that brat to tag along would be a nuisance. Kakashi's blood went cold. That old and irritated voice was not one that he had ever hoped to hear again, not under these circumstances. If he was here, then that could only mean the worst, and not even the route backup would be of any use now. Turning casually, he spied into the darkened woods around the makeshift camp, watching in trepidation as a small figure slowly melted out of the shadows, floating out above the ground like a ghost. Only it wasn't a ghost, it was much worse. Kakashi Hatake, the Tsuchikage greeted, eyes scanning over the Jonin and his two genin with complete disregard. He was a rather short old man, a fact that was apparent even as he defied gravity to float up at eye level to Kakashi. A balding head, big red nose, and gray beard and mustache showed both his age and his strength. No one in the shinobi world got to that age without being extremely lucky or incredibly powerful. Considering that this was a cage in question, the latter replied. I seem to remember Konoha worked in 4-man groups. My intel tells me the last genin under you should be a blonde. I wonder which one is who I'm looking for. The boy, or the girl. From the shadows, 3 more presences made themselves known. 2 large men, both sporting the uniforms of Iwa Jonin, and a young girl wearing her own variation of the traditional Iwa attire. From the embered look on the girl's face, and the judgmental glares from the 3 men with her, it was clear who had given their position away. Kakashi didn't concern himself with the extra members. None of their faces stood out to him. Onoki was the only true worry here. The Tsuchikage may have been old, but his skills and abilities were still legendary. Kakashi had no doubts that the vertically challenged man before them could wipe each member of his team from existence here and now with little trouble. Glancing back at his 2 genin, both clearly not aware of the true danger they were in, Kakashi knew the only option here was diplomacy. He bowed deeply. Lord Tsuchikage, he greeted, internally sighing in relief as Sasuke and Sakura froze and followed his example quickly. To what do we owe the pleasure? I was under the belief that we would be meeting a representative of Iwa. Things were starting to click for Kakashi, whose mind had been racing. This was not a trap, at least not in the traditional sense. There was no way the Tsuchikage himself would attend such a trivial task as eliminating a Konoha team or abducting the last Uchiha. Onoki knew better than to have any physical connections to his underhanded tactics. His being here ruined any chances of denying his involvement. All it would take was one of Kakashi's summons, and Konoha would know everything. Something else was going on. Onoki had voiced his interest in Kakashi's 3rd student, the blonde, Naruto, who was thankfully not present for this. Was that Iwa's play? Were they after the Kyuubi? Somehow that made Kakashi more nervous than if they had been after the Sharingan. He could have sacrificed himself for his team if Iwa were only after the Dojutsu, but the Kyuubi, there was no prize great enough to distract from that goal. Onoki scoffed. I get enough groveling from my own men. Don't sully your reputation by bowing to me, Hatake, he scolded. You've enough of my country's blood on your hands to know better than that. Grandfather. The girl yelled. They need to show respect. Shut it, Kuro, Onoki snapped. You are here to learn, Nothing else. Stay silent and listen carefully. The girl glared but didn't disobey her orders. Onoki floated to the ground, gently resting his feet on the GR and rubbing his back as he hunched over. You're correct, Hitaki. Your team was supposed to meet a representative from my village. However, given that almost everyone in Iowa so desperately wants to use such an opportunity to get some petty revenge for the past, I am forced to take matters into my own hands. Consider yourself lucky I haven't kicked the bucket yet. Kakashi took a deep breath, knowing he wasn't going to like the answer to his next question. And I suppose it is you who we are escorting back to Konoha? He asked carefully, hoping that the Tsuchikage's presence was nothing more than a formality. The bug-eyed expressions of his students were almost physically noticeable from behind him. I trust that won't be a problem, Onoki said with a grin. I did make sure to request the most interesting team from the recent Chunin exams. Sakura was, surprisingly, the one to speak up. Iowa wasn't a participant in the recent Chunin exams. How do you know we were in them? Kuretsuchi laughed. Oh wow, you really are fresh genin, huh? Kakashi sighed and turned an eye smile to a confused Sakura. Sakura, maybe it's best not to say anything that confirms information the enemy may or may not know is true. He said it gently, but the girl was quick to blush as bright as her hair and clamp her mouth shut with an understanding nod. Turning his attention back to the Tsuchikage, he narrowed his eye slightly. You sure seem interested in my team. Onoki chuckled. Indeed, I am, he chortled, his beady eyes hopping excitedly between the two genin present. One in particular. His eyes stopped on Sasuke for a moment, making the Uchiha go tense before his gaze drifted away. Tell me, Hitaki, where is this Uzumaki I've heard so much about? I am very interested in seeing him for myself. Surely you can understand. It was Sasuke's turn to voice his confusion. You're after that idiot? He asked scathingly. Either his pride had been hurt at being overlooked for someone like Naruto, or he was genuinely in disbelief that Iowa would be after Naruto at all. Kakashi could only curse silently at his bad luck. Of course, that was what this was about. It was only a matter of time really. Everyone who knew the truth understood that this was a very likely possibility as time went on. The resemblances were simply too glaring to ignore. For the likes of Iowa, that similarity would be too much a reminder of what had cost them the war, of their humiliation. No way they would let such a reminder exist if they could help it. Perhaps letting Naruto attend the very publicized Chunin exams so early was a mistake. Idiot. The Tsuchikage laughed. A genin, an orphan no less, who defeated skilled members of two of Konoha's proud clans during the exams, only to go on and defeat a raging Jinchuriki in the midst of an invasion. Yes, I'm sure the boy is an idiot. Onoki leveled a displeased stare at Sasuke, somehow proving capable of looking down on someone who stood taller than him. Only an Uchiha would possess such arrogance. For those that possess such a powerful dojutsu, your clan truly were so blind. Glad to see you're holding on to tradition. Lord Tsuchikage, if I may, Kakashi spoke up quickly. I would request that you save anything you have to say about any of my genin for the Hokage. It was bad enough to learn that Iowa had such intimate knowledge of what had occurred during the Chunin exams. The last thing anyone needed was Naruto's lineage being revealed by another village. Once the accusation was out there, no amount of denying or cover stories would be enough to hide the truth for long. Actually, in their current state, the Hokage may end up being forced to publicly announce the truth to save face. Konoha was already spread thin in an attempt to keep up appearances after the invasion attempt. The new alliance with Suna helped, but if Iowa smelled blood in the water. Onoki sneered. Konoha insults us, he said. Your Hokage insults us. You insult us. Were you not the student of the Yellow Flash? To think this is how his legacy is treated. Burdened and hidden away like some shameful secret to be kept from the world. Tisk, the very notion is as good as spitting on the man's grave. No, I will not stand for it. If the boy truly is who I think he is, then Iowa demands you acknowledge it. Anything less is blatant disregard for our village's shared history. Kakashi-sensei, what is he talking about? Sakura asked softly. The two Iowa Jonin grunted rudely at the question, both visibly annoyed at the revelation that the girl didn't know what was being spoken of. Even his teammates don't know. Kuretsuchi asked in surprise. Onoki shook his head. You aren't even denying it, Hitaki, he said. Never mind. I'll know the truth as soon as I see him with my own eyes. Reports can only be trusted so much. So, where is this Uzumaki? Kakashi squared his stance and weighed his options, few as they were. At the end of the day, the secret of Naruto's identity was not worth the lives of the team, nor the loss of whatever little stability remained between Konoha and Iwa. The third Hokage would just have to handle the fallout however he could. Kakashi refused to lose anyone under his command, not for something so trivial. Preparing himself for the inevitable explanation he would need to provide, he motioned for his students to stow their weapons. However, his response to the Tsuchikage never came. Instead, the group as a whole were all put on edge, an oppressive weight bearing down on them suddenly as Kakashi's eyes widened in realization. Well, it seems he's been found, Onoki said smugly. Don't worry, my man won't hurt him too much. I'm sure he's just eager to test himself against the boy. They have so much in common, after all. Temari cursed under her breath as she leapt out of the way of another large tree limb being thrown her way. This was completely ridiculous. As if having a Jinchuriki as a brother wasn't somehow bad enough, or being married to one wasn't just the universe's idea of a sick joke, Temari now had to try and survive another insanely powerful, beast-containing shinobi. When would the madness end? Drawing her knives, she coated them in wind chakra and charged into the night, homing in on the bright red figures hashing it out through the forest. Temari knew this was going to be a trap. Iwa just couldn't be anything but backstabbing holes. It's who they were. But this, even she had to question the levels they were going to, and for what? Was the Kyuubi truly that valuable or was Iwa simply that greedy? Not that it mattered to Temari. For whatever reason, Iwa was after Naruto, and she wasn't about to let them have him without a fight. With any luck she could help drag the fight out long enough for the rest of the team to catch up and help outnumber the Jinchuriki. Considering how quickly the attacker and Naruto had jumped into their Biju cloaks, there was no questioning if the fight had been sensed by now. She leapt up into the treetops, hopping across the canopy above the fighting in the hopes of going unseen and getting a better vantage point. Coming to a stop, Temari wasn't at all surprised to find Naruto being easily held at bay his opponent. This wasn't any ordinary man. Temari would recognize that strange headpiece and the red hair and beard anywhere. She had committed the face to memory, as did almost all Suna shinobi who knew to keep an eye on Iwa. Roshi, Jinchuriki of the Yonbi, and from what Temari had heard, possibly the oldest recorded Jinchuriki that anyone knew of. Compared to Roshi, Naruto was quite literally a child, and it showed in their battle. Down below, Naruto growled in frustration as another clawed swipe of his hand was effortlessly dodged. The redhead dropped down onto his hands, spinning around and delivering a kick to Naruto's middle that would have sent him crashing into a tree only for a tail of chakra to snatch him out of the air and slam him into the ground. No sooner had he hit the ground was he hoisted up, a vicious punch connecting with his jaw before being tossed aside like a toy, tumbling to the ground in a messy heap of red and orange. Naruto dragged himself to his feet, wounds already healing as he glared hatefully at the unimpressed redhead. Both of their respective Biju cloaks sitting at an easily managed single tail, only the older man's cloak was noticeably more controlled as he held a disappointed stare at the boy. I was hoping for more, the man said, his single chakra tail coiling itself up beneath him as he lifted himself into the air and crossed his legs. Elbow on his knee, and chin resting on his palm, the man yawned. This is barely a workout for me, boy. Please tell me that isn't everything Konoha's Jinchuriki has to offer. Naruto narrowed his eyes, but wisely didn't charge headfirst back into the fight. If the old man was waiting, then that didn't bode well for him. Care to pitch in on this one, Fox? The ape is here, the Kyuubi said irritably. You would be wise to regroup with your team. Naruto heeded the warning, turning to make a break for it. The moment one foot left the ground, the other was snagged by a chakra tail, dragging him from his feet and towards the man. He brought his arms up quick enough to block a punch that rattled his entire body. He made a hand seal, spawning several shadow clones around them as he crashed to the ground, concealed momentarily by the plumes of smoke. Naruto let his cloak recede, jumping off towards the treetops. A knee to the gut stopped him halfway, then an open palm to the face sent him back to the forest floor. His clones hadn't so much as distracted this guy. Gritting his teeth, blood trickling from an already healing broken nose, Naruto glared at the man. Roshi smirked, casually scratching at his beard. "No running away," he said. "I want to see what all this fuss is about. You stirred up enough commotion back home to make that insufferable old fool call me back. Show me that you're worth ruining my retirement plan." Trying to run was pointless, Naruto could figure that much out. This guy was faster than him, simple as that. The Kyuubi's chakra bubbled out once more, coating him. Fighting was the only option. Hopefully the rest of the team were already on the way. Naruto did not want to make a habit of being caught out alone and getting beaten every time he left the village. He rushed forward, Roshi meeting him in the middle. Hands and feet blurred into action, clones popped in and out of existence, and yet with each ping moment Naruto failed to make any headway. Roshi, unsurprisingly, hadn't gotten to his age by being an easy opponent. His movements were chaotic but fluid, acrobatic even. Every one of Naruto's strikes that couldn't be dodged was easily overpowered and shrugged off. And then came his response. The battlefield may as well have been a playground to Roshi. Pivoting on foot, hand, and tail, he maneuvered himself around Naruto with ease, toying with him like a monkey would pester a rodent, all the while making his growing displeasure known. An elbow to the ribs. Weak. A knee to the thigh. Slow. A punch to the sternum. Pathetic. With a sweep of his tail, he swatted Naruto aside like a fly. Is this all the Konoha has? Some half-baked weapon that hasn't even been sharpened? Naruto groaned as he got to his feet again, a bloody grin plastered on his face. So, this was the strength of the Jinchuriki. His expectations had been set a little low with Gaara, but that couldn't be helped. The Suna Jinchuriki wasn't of sound mind at the time and was likely never trained in his abilities. But this man, this Jinchuriki from Iowa, was a true example of what a Jinchuriki could become, and Naruto was ecstatic to see it in action. Reaching deeper, his cloak grew, a second tail slowly forming behind him. His grin grew as well when Roshi effortlessly spawned a second tail of his own in an instant. To see such control, such mastery of a Biju's chakra, it was inspiring. Do not think it will be simple to attain such control with my chakra, the fox growled. The ape may be of my kin, but it is still far beneath myself in terms of power. Naruto didn't care about that. All he needed was the proof that harnessing a Biju's power properly was possible, and the man before him was providing that proof in spades. He charged with renewed vigor, this time with much more speed and power. Slowly, Naruto adapted to trying to use his tails as actual limbs of his own, doing his best to use them to keep the man's own tails at bay while he lashed out with his taijutsu. He knew that wouldn't be enough. Holding back a little, he reserved his energy, dancing along as Roshi continued to toy with him. Naruto waited patiently, keeping his distance, watching, learning as best he could in the moment, until an opening presented itself. A whistle of cold sharp steel through the air caught both Jinchuriki's attention, Roshi quickly tilting his head to the side to avoid the wind-coated trench knife aimed for him. The blade sailed onward, straight towards Naruto, only to stop suddenly midair. Naruto smirked. The blade whipped around, shooting back at Roshi and forcing the man to twist his body to avoid it once more. That was opening enough. Pushing as much chakra as he could manage into his arm, Naruto formed a large red claw and lunged at Roshi. Talons of red chakra tore at the man's side, ripping through his clothes and carving into his skin. A flesh wound at best, but it still drew blood. For Naruto, that was enough. Roshi smirked, cartwheeling away from the boy and narrowly avoiding another wind-coated knife that whipped around the air in a strange way before finding itself returning to its owner. Temari caught her blade, landing in a ready crouch beside Naruto and never taking her eyes off of Roshi. The two stood there, eyeing down their opponent cautiously while the red-haired man patted at his side with nothing more than a pout. The sizzling sound of his wounds closing was all that could be heard in the clearing. Not bad, kid. Not bad, Roshi said. Teamwork is a good strategy. Most Jinchuriki don't get the privilege. Guess Konoha are special that way. His eyes focused on Temari as he tilted his head. But you aren't from Konoha, are you? Temari cursed under her breath, regretting having not cast aside her Suna headband in favor of a Konoha one. Of course, someone from Iowa would have it out for Suna. The two villages were on less than good terms even at the best of times. God damn it, she cursed, glancing to Naruto. Is this just how it's going to be with you? What's next? Is a Kage going to come looking for a fight with you? Naruto scowled. It's not like I wanted this, he yelled. Why are you still here? You should have gone off and gotten Kakashi by now. And leave you alone to get your kicked, or killed, or worse, captured, Temari argued. She shook her head angrily. No, no way. You're his target. I'll keep him busy. You make a run for it. Naruto looked at her skeptically. You're going to keep him busy with those? He questioned, motioning to her two knives. Even coated in wind chakra, they didn't present much of a threat to someone who just shrugged off Biju claws like they were splinters. Temari furrowed her brow, letting her trench knives fall from her hands. Instead of dropping to the ground, they stopped in the air and hung as if by an unseen string. Producing a small scroll from her pouch, Temari unraveled it and in a plume of smoke was left holding her battle fan. With a strange gesture from her free hand, her knives sprung to life, circling her slowly and spinning rapidly, all the while still coated in her wind chakra. The result was what appeared to be two small saw blades swirling around her protectively. If the added weapon or strange behavior of the knives made Roshi worried, he didn't show it. He continued to regard her with the same level of concern as he had prior, when he had chosen to completely ignore her in favor of Naruto. Oh, how exciting, Roshi drawled. A wind user with some puppetry tricks. So original. Let's see how you two handle some heat. He ran through a string of hand seals, too fast for either genin to keep track of, not that they would have been able to know what jutsu he intended to use. Lava style. Magma flow. Roshi slammed his hands into the ground, the earth beneath him quickly heating and warping. He plunged his hands into the liquid stone, pulling at it before pushing out towards the kids. The ground obeyed, the magma expanding out rapidly as it formed a large wave that raged towards them. Naruto was the first to respond, his own hands diving into the ground as he flooded it with his own chakra, his earth nature fighting to impede the spread of the magma conversion. He managed to create a safe space around Temari and himself, but it wouldn't stop the wave that was already formed. Luckily, Temari was already on it. Her fan snapped open, and in a single swing she created a powerful gust of wind that collided with the lava wall, rapidly cooling it back into a solid state. Then, before they could take a breath, the wall exploded, a ball of lava shooting through the solid wave. Temari motioned with her hand, and her knives followed, two spinning blades of wind rushing forward and cleaving the ball of lava in two, cooling the center as they went. Naruto followed her lead, his tail speared into the solid part of the lava ball and pulled it apart like a cracked stone, each half landing harmlessly on either side of them. It wasn't until they took a breath that they realized their mistake. Looking around, they found themselves caught in the middle of a giant ring of fire and molten rock. A wall had been built around them. The attacks they had dealt with had been a distraction, a trap, and they had fallen for it completely. Quote exclamation mark quote. They cursed in unison. Youngsters these days, Roshi said, sitting atop the now frozen wave of lava. Kids like you wouldn't have lasted a week in the war. Especially not an untrained, undisciplined Jinchuriki. He snorted. What the hell is Konoha doing with you? Naruto looked around. There was no way out, nowhere but up. Even if Temari used her jutsu to cool a section of the magma and cut a path out, they still had Roshi himself to deal with. There was no way he was going to give them enough time to make an escape. Naruto wasn't sure how long he could hold his Biju cloak under these conditions. If it came down to a battle of attrition, they would lose, badly. That left only one real option, and it was a stupid one. Temari, get Kakashi, he said, ignoring Temari's perplexed look. One of his tails wrapped around her middle, hoisting her off the ground, and in one fluid motion, threw her up into the air, far from what was about to happen. Naruto had already accidentally gotten her caught up in a fight she didn't need to be involved in. That tiny pang of guilt still hung over his head no matter how hard he tried to excuse himself for it. This time wouldn't be like that. Roshi watched on curiously, making no move to stop Naruto's actions. Well, that solves that little problem, he said. Lowering into a ready stance, he rolled his shoulder in preparation for the fight to continue. Can't exactly see how you measure up when I have to avoid killing the Suna girl. So, now that there are no distractions, why don't you show me just how behind you truly are? Kyubi. How many tails can we risk? The fox chuckled from within its cage. 4, it answered, already knowing of its host's plan. Can we do it? In your condition, barely. Naruto bared his teeth and lowered himself to all fours. The chakra shroud bubbled and flickered around him, slowly but surely getting darker as his skin began to burn. Blood seeped from wounds now stuck in a perpetual loop of opening and closing, the world around him turning to fire. His vision tunneled. The magma vanished, the trees no longer a concern. To Naruto, there was only his body, engulfed in fire and burning away, and his opponent. Empty glowing eyes stared at the man, focused completely on their target. A maw of sharp teeth grinned inhumanly wide, long ears atop his head folded back angrily, and 4 tails swished behind him in anticipation. Stupid. That's exactly what this was. Naruto had sworn he wouldn't push himself to the point of risking losing control like he had before, but this time was different. The Kyuubi's influence was there, mind-meltingly so, yet not so much as to completely push Naruto out, not yet anyway. There would be a brief overlap of time, a precious moment where Naruto's consciousness and the Kyuubi's power overlapped, where he could focus it, guide it, aim it. Regrettably, Naruto hadn't had any chances to practice with the idea. With no way of knowing how long the window would last, he would have to act fast. The Kyuubi had promised to cut off its chakra before things went too far, so there was relief in that knowledge. Temari was out of harm's way, and there was no one else around he had to worry about. Now was as good a time as any to get in some practice. It was either take the risk, or risk being captured. Trading Konoha for any other hidden village was, quite honestly, not in the cards. From his place across the small battlefield, Roshi watched on in amusement. Well, that is promising, he mumbled, his own cloak growing quickly to a controlled 4 tails. His head tilted as the bestial form before him growled deeply, the weight of the chakra making up the boy's new form cracking the ground beneath its limbs. Not much of you left in there, is there, boy? That's a shame. Takes the fun out of it for me. Oh well, at least you're taking this seriously. Guess I'll show you the same courtesy. Temari flew through the air, a scowl on her face the entire time. How dare he toss her like that? If Roshi didn't kill him, then she would next chance she got. Twisting herself upright, she snapped her fan open and planted her feet on it. Using the fan as a glider, she aimed for the direction of the camp. It was surprising how far away they had been pushed by the attacking Jinchuriki. Once she lost enough altitude, Temari folded her fan and began racing through the trees. She didn't look back, there was no need to. Temari could feel what was happening in the distance. The surge of power, the dreadful sensation it filled her with making her long-since healed ribs ache slightly in remembrance. There was no way she would forget what had happened, and now it was happening again. Knowing she needed to get help, she pushed herself. The reality of the situation did, however, sink in as she went. If Kakashi and the team weren't there to aid her and Naruto by now, then something was keeping them from doing so. It made sense. Sending a single Jinchuriki to abduct another wouldn't work out if they were expected to take on a full team. Roshi must have had backup. That made things a little trickier. Temari could only hope that her addition to the fray would change the tides, and from their focus could be returned to Naruto. If what she remembered of the last incident was anything to go by, then time was of the essence. With this in mind, you could understand Temari's shock as she finally breached the tree line of the camp, stumbling into what was quite clearly not a fight to the death. She skidded to a halt, fan open behind her at the ready, as her eyes locked onto the 4 Iwanin. What the hell is going on? She demanded, glancing expectantly at Kakashi. If it weren't for the worried expression in the Jonin's lone eye, fixated in the direction of Naruto's battle, Temari would have assumed the team were trapped in some sort of genjutsu. Not getting an answer, her focus returned to the Iwanin, none of whom were making a move towards her, and were instead waiting in a bored manner. The cogs of her racing mind ground to a pause when the smallest of the group, a notably older and comically short man, became a little too familiar for her liking. No way. Oh, a Suna brat. Onoki chuckled. I guess the information on your new alliance was true. What is he doing here? Temari asked heatedly. Kakashi tore his eye away from the glow in the distance to give a roaring look to Temari. It's okay. We aren't in danger, he said. Temari gawked at him. Not in danger. What the hell do you call that? She pointed angrily to where another large eruption of power shook the ground. The battle was either getting closer or more violent, and neither option was good in her mind. She rounded an accusatory glare at the Tsuchikage. You. This is all you, isn't it? What? 2 Jinchuriki aren't enough for Iwa. Is that how greedy you've become? Mind your tongue when addressing Lord Tsuchikage. Kuretsuchi yelled. Shut up. Temari yelled, pointing at Onoki. Call him off. He's your dog, right? You sent him after Naruto. Call him off, right now. Onoki laughed loudly. Quite the spirit this one has, he said, grinning at Temari. As much as I enjoy your little display of camaraderie, I'm afraid it is out of my hands. Surely you can sense it yourself. That is no longer a battle any of us have any place interfering with. Temari frowned. She hated to admit it, but the Tsuchikage was right. A battle between Jinchuriki was its own thing. Getting involved, without being a ridiculously powerful individual, was usually a death sentence. Not that that changed how Temari felt about what was going on. Why? She asked. Why not? Onoki said, shrugging. It's not every day one gets a chance to test the capability of another village's Jinchuriki outside of all-out war. The ground shook again, the night sky in the distance flashing red. I can't say I am disappointed. Jinchuriki or not, there aren't many who can hold their own against Roshi, for this long at least. Kakashi finally turned a stern eye to the Tsuchikage. You said Naruto was safe from your man. Onoki nodded. I did. And it was the truth, he said. Roshi is under strict instruction not to kill the brat. I can't promise the kid won't manage to kill himself in the process though. Temari looked between Kakashi and the Tsuchikage, her brow furrowed. Would someone tell me what the hell is going on? It took a minute, throughout which the explanation got interrupted by more explosions of power in the distance, but eventually Temari got the gist of it. Their mission, to meet a diplomatic party and escort them back to Konoha, was nothing more than a ruse to lure Naruto out. After the Chunin exams, it seemed the other villages had grown curious about where Konoha's Jinchuriki stood in comparison to their own. Iwa was just the only one with the balls to straight up test it for themselves. The fact that such a stunt could ignite a war didn't bother the senile Tsuchikage in the slightest. The tiny man was living up to Temari's idea of him more and more by the second. Eventually the night went quiet again. The battle wound down slowly, something that Temari found herself comforted by. Had the Kyuubi's signature simply been snuffed out in an instant, she would have cause to worry. Instead, they all felt the enormous pressure of power die down, until it eventually faded. Temari didn't like it, and clearly neither did the others from Konoha, all of them forced to stand there, waiting on anxious feet for something to happen. That something came in the form of Roshi making his way into the camp, an unconscious Naruto slung over his shoulder. Temari's eyes widened at the sight. She hadn't had a chance to see Naruto immediately after his last Kyuubi episode until the toads had already began lathering him in mud and bandages. She knew the extent of his injuries, all a result of drawing on too much of his Biju's power, but she hadn't actually seen them at the height of damage. Now, hanging like a boned fish over Roshi's shoulder, Naruto looked like he'd been boiled alive. His skin was all red raw, blood seeping from still open wounds. His clothes were stained, covered in blood and dirt, burnt in many places and torn in many more. The only relief to those seeing him was that he was still clearly breathing and was thankfully free of any other noticeable injuries. This brat is the stupidest Jinchuriki I've ever met, Roshi said, letting Naruto fall from his shoulder with a grunt, the boy's body hitting the ground like a sack of potatoes. Naruto! Temari yelled, rushing to his side. Gently, she positioned him as comfortably as she could on the ground. Doing a quick assessment of his injuries, she was a little surprised to find that much of his skin was already in the stages of healing. Glaring up at Roshi, Temari sneered. Was this really necessary? Roshi shrugged. No, but it's his fault. He's the one who decided to escalate things so quickly, he said, turning a questioning look towards Kakashi. And you, what the hell is Konoha doing with him? No Jinchuriki in their right mind would push themselves like that. Does he have any training at all? What if he lost control? Temari ignored the conversation, choosing to focus on tending to Naruto. She was no medic, but she knew enough first aid. Unsealing a few supplies, she began carefully smearing a healing salve on the worst spots and bandaging where it was still bleeding. Sakura soon joined her, offering what little medical jutsu she could. It was nice to see one of Naruto's teammates being willing to help him, even if the horrified expression on the girl's face was all too clear. Temari couldn't be sure if Sakura was horrified at having to help Naruto or the scale of injuries she was looking at. Either way, Temari was thankful for the East. It came as little surprise, when Temari finally glanced at the others, that she found Sasuke glaring at Naruto. The Uchiha's gaze only shifting to focus on Roshi every now and again. She shook her head and returned to tending to Naruto. Nothing else mattered. If they weren't under attack, then everything else could wait. Whatever political bullshit Iwa was trying to pull, whatever way Konoha was going to bend over backwards to try and maintain peace, Temari wanted nothing to do with it. She had already given away everything for the sake of peaceful relations. Someone else could worry about it this time. Once Naruto was tended to the best of her and Sakura's ability, and it seemed that nothing else was going to happen, the Iwa team moved to a separate camp, promising to rejoin them in the morning to begin the journey to Konoha. Kakashi did his best to assure his team that everything was fine. It's just how Iwa is, he had said, as if that excused their actions. Temari knew better. Iwa was up to something, and Naruto was at the center of it. Someone had to keep an eye on them. Needless to say, Temari's eyes and ears would be more focused than ever for the foreseeable future. She wouldn't be getting much sleep that night. Your thoughts? Onoki asked. They were far enough away from the Konoha team now that they could talk freely. There was little that needed to be said, with only one real question needing be answered. A look at Roshi was enough to tell the Iwa team what they needed to know of the boy's capabilities as a Jinchuriki. From the red-haired man's disheveled appearance, his own clothes having a few burns and tears, it was clear the Uzumaki could hold his own decently against a much stronger opponent. The biggest concern was the large missing piece of Roshi's shirt, the cloth torn in a suspicious and familiar circular pattern. If whatever had caused such damage had also injured the man, it had long since healed. Fresh skin, as if nothing had touched him, was clearly visible through the hole in the fabric. Kid's an idiot, Roshi said. Cared more about that Suna girl than he did his own life. Or maybe just cared more about fighting me himself. As soon as he got her out of the picture, he pumped so much of his Biju's chakra into himself that it started to destroy his body. Stupid. Onoki nodded, stroking his chin thoughtfully. The Suna girl, How interesting. And the other matter? Roshi frowned, his hand absent-mindedly rubbing his stomach through the hole in his shirt. If he isn't the son of the Yellow Flash, then Konoha are going to great lengths to make him look like it, he said. Little bugger hit me with a Biju-powered Rasengan. Hurt like hell. Ha ha ha. Let us be thankful that the fourth Hokage never made himself a Jinchuriki, Onoki laughed, ignoring the way his statement made the rest of his team pale considerably. Grandfather, why did we not take them by surprise? Kuretsuchi asked. The son of the White Fang, the last Uchiha, the daughter of the late Kazekage, and the Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi, who is very likely the son of the Yellow Flash. We could have claimed them all, or at least removed them as threats to Iwagakure. Why lure them all out here if not to act on it? Onoki snorted. Some years ago, I would have agreed with you, Kuro. Sadly, things aren't as they were. If we wish to retain what strength we have, then sacrifices are going to have to be made. You would do well to pay close attention to the shifts that are going to occur soon. Kuretsuchi crossed her arms. Is this because of Kumo? She asked in annoyance. We don't need to be coddling up to the tree huggers just because of them. We can take them. Don't be too eager to cast aside willing allies, Roshi said. Remember, Kumo is still the only village with 2 fully trained Jinchuriki. If the rumors are to be believed, then both are completely cooperative with their Biju, one of which happens to be the Hachibi. So, we have you and Han. Not to mention you just beat Konoha's Jinchuriki into the ground. What do we need him for? Kuretsuchi asked, her expression falling as both Roshi and Onoki frowned deeply at her words and shared a look. Grandfather. Onoki shook his head. He was getting too old for this. Things are more complicated than you know, Kuretsuchi, he said. Just know, for the moment, it is in our best interests to keep it civil with Konoha. I have no intentions of bowing down to them, nor will I expect our own to forgive or forget what we lost at their hands. However, if we can use them to help us overcome a hurdle, then that is exactly what we will do. Aiwa will survive whatever the future throws at us, by any means necessary. Roshi and the other men all nodded in silent agreement before continuing on, leaving a puzzled Kuretsuchi lagging behind. The girl still had many pieces missing from the puzzle, but she found comfort in her grandfather's words. She had worried that in his old age her grandfather had become soft, susceptible to the allure of securing peace through an official alliance. It was good to know that wasn't the case. With a smirk, she followed after the group. Aiwa would continue to survive and thrive, just as it always had, alone. Had Kuretsuchi paid more attention, she would have noticed the tiny insect detach itself from her and disappear into the shadows, returning to its master. Naruto woke up to the wind rushing past him. While the breeze through his hair was a pleasant sensation, the feeling of the cold air on his still very fresh and tender skin was less so. Cracking an eye open, he took note of his surroundings. They were on their way back to Konoha, or so it seemed. That was good. Kakashi, Sasuke, and Sakura were up ahead. A positive sign. Shifting his head slightly, he let a small groan escape him, catching the attention of his carrier. If it hadn't been for Temari's distinct scent, Naruto may have worried that he was being kidnapped by Aiwa. Temari slowed her pace, dropping from the treetops as gently as she could. The rest of the group followed her, and it was only then that Naruto realized that it wasn't just his team traveling with them. The Aiwa escort stopped with them, though they seemed to have the decency to maintain a respectable distance. Naruto could only grumble to himself in frustration. A test. That's all it had been. Of course. Clearly there were a lot of pieces to the puzzle that he was missing at the moment, but he was sure he could fill those in time. All that mattered to him right now was finding out just how bad he had messed himself up by abusing the Kyuubi's chakra. You okay? Temari asked, still holding him on her back. Naruto nodded weakly and lifted his arms to her shoulders to help lower himself down. Everything hurt. Not nearly as bad as the last time he had pushed himself like that, yet still bad enough to make him reconsider asking Temari to keep carrying him. Warily, he stumbled onto his feet and tried to stretch himself out, silently thankful that Temari kept a hold of one of his arms for balance. He glanced over towards the Aiwa group, eyeing Roshi cautiously. Quick version, he asked, looking at Temari. Temari shrugged. The Tsuchikage is visiting Konoha for peace talks. Brought bodyguards. Roshi thought it would be fun to see what Konoha's Jinchuriki was like, she explained quickly. Naruto grimaced. Peace talks. And somehow the Jinchuriki would be involved. That meant he was going to be dragged into several long, time-wasting meetings when they got home. What joy. Thank you, he said, steadying himself and pulling away from her aid. Are you well enough to travel? Temari asked, getting a nod in response. She smiled sweetly. Good. Without warning, she punched Naruto in the face. The sound of his nose breaking under her knuckles making everyone present flinch. Before Naruto could recoil too far from the hit, he was grabbed by the front of his jacket and pulled back under Temari's glare. The next time you get the bright idea to throw me in the air, I highly recommend you rethink your strategy. Got it. Ow. Naruto said vacantly. He was already still healing from before. Did she really have to go adding to that list so quickly? I got it. Onoki was the first to break the silence, laughing loudly at the scene. Oh, I like this one, he said. Perhaps the next generation are not as lost as I had thought. Naruto straightened his nose and wiped the blood on his sleeve. Feel better? Temari smirked. A little, yeah, alright you too, Kakashi interjected. No more lovers' spats until we get back to Konoha. Naruto joined Temari in a shared glare at the cycloptic Jonin. His sense of humor was truly getting on their nerves. After a quick breather, they were off again. They set a steady pace of travel. The mission wasn't time sensitive, so there was no hurry to get back. It was also best to not try and exert anyone as they went. Traveling with a cage was like wearing a bright neon sign on your back that screamed, "Kill me," to the world. They all needed to remain alert and at the top of their game, ready for anything, or anyone, stupid enough to take the risk. And stupid they would have to be. With Kakashi of the Sharingan, 2 Jinchuriki, one of the last surviving Uchiha, 3 direct descendants of Kage, and the oldest Kage alive currently, their little group was a bounty hunter's most terrifying wet dream. As they moved, Naruto could feel the eyes on him the whole time. Every single member of the Iowa party was watching him like hawks. He couldn't quite make heads or tails of it either. Each one had a feeling behind their gaze that differed. The Tsuchikage was watching him with a discomforting amount of intrigue. It made Naruto's skin crawl. The 2 Jonin were kind enough to only watch him with a level of caution, which was understandable. Even if Roshi had proved that he was no threat to the Tsuchikage, Naruto was still a Jinchuriki, and as such was potentially unpredictable. Speaking of Roshi, the red-headed man hadn't so much as spoken a word the entire time. He just watched Naruto in the same way an academy teacher would watch the troublemaker of the CL. Naruto had no idea how to feel about that, but at least it was better than the openly curious stare of the girl in their numbers. Kuretsuchi, as he had found out she was called, either lacked the ability, or care factor, to conceal her blatant fascination of both Naruto and Temari. It had been amusing for the first couple of hours, but now it was creepy. Somehow, none of that could quite compare to the real problem. Sasuke Uchiha. Naruto was fully aware of his teammates' dislike of him. It never mattered, so it had never proven a problem. Yet now, as he felt the Uchiha's eyes turning to him every so often with nothing but rage burning behind them, Naruto couldn't help but think that the days of simply ignoring Sasuke were quickly coming to an end. Actually, there was likely many things in his life that were soon to become far more complicated. Such was the way of his life. Maybe the Kyuubi had been right, they should have just made a run for it when he was younger. Too late now. Camp that night was a civil enough affair. Naruto was more than happy to take first shift of watch again, despite how badly that had ended last time. One of the Iowa Jonin stayed up as well. Unsurprisingly, there wasn't much trust to be had. Everything was going smoothly, the night especially the alone time giving Naruto a good chance to meditate and channel some extra chakra into healing his body. Intel. Did you know? Sasuke's voice was like a cheese grater to the brain for Naruto, tearing him from his peaceful meditation to sneer at the boy. Know what? He asked. Who your father was? Naruto shrugged. I'm an orphan. Konoha's loyal Jinchuriki, he drawled. I don't have a father. Don't need one either. Sasuke frowned. You don't believe that. It doesn't matter what I believe, Naruto said. What I am will always be more important than who I am. Not that any of that should matter to you. Why do you suddenly care about who my father might have been? It is the reason they are here at all, Sasuke seethed. Iwa believes you are the son of the 4th Hokage. The more I think about it, the more it makes sense. So, I'll ask again. Did you know? Naruto stared blankly at Sasuke. I had my suspicions. And yet you were happy living as a nobody. I'm a Jinchuriki. I am a nobody. The moment the 4th Hokage sealed the 9 tails in me, my fate was sealed with it, Naruto snapped. I thought you of all people would understand that. Or do you honestly think that Konoha cares about anything other than those precious eyes in your head? Sasuke grunted. You have a point there. He stared at the blonde for a time, as if silently weighing up his next words carefully. What will you do now? Once we get back to Konoha, I doubt Iwa will allow your little secret to be kept quiet any longer. Naruto snorted. That was the understatement of the century. Iwa was pissed, or at least the Tsuchikage was. Truth be told, Naruto had no idea what to expect when they got home. Though it would be entertaining to watch the Hokage try and weasel his way out of this particular predicament. As far as plans went, he had none. His only working plan for the time being was to survive and get stronger, which was really more a necessity of life than a plan. Having Temari forced into the mix didn't help, but he supposed it wasn't all bad with her involved. Once his lineage was revealed, it stood to reason that the marriage alliance would only become a simpler matter. Suna would rejoice, Temari would possibly not feel so worthless, and Konoha might even give him some much-needed space. Unlikely, but hey, a guy could dream. Keep doing what I've been doing, Naruto answered. This changes nothing for me. Whatever. You can go back to camp. I'll take over from here. Naruto eyed Sasuke wearily for a second before nodding and making to leave. He paused in his step, noticing Sasuke eyeing a specific spot of darkness beyond the trees with his Sharingan. When Naruto looked, there was nothing there, but there was no doubt that there were people following them. Friend or foe, it wasn't quite clear. Naruto leaned more towards friend, or at the very least neutral, since they had been tailing them since leaving Konoha. Though he doubted that those in question would risk coming this close to the camp. Anbu would have more tact. It did beg to be asked as to which member of their little team was valuable enough to deserve a hidden escort for such a mission. Probably a combination of members actually, the more he thought about it. Leaving Sasuke to his own devices, Naruto continued back, not at all surprised to find himself silently joined by Temari. That explained what Sasuke was trying to see in the darkness. The smile on the girl's face told Naruto enough about what she had been doing. Not that he could be surprised about that either. Snooping was, after all, a major part of being a shinobi. So, Naruto sighed deeply. This was turning out to be a long night already. So what? Are you the fourth son? Temari asked bluntly. You don't think so? Not enough resemblance. Temari snorted. The resemblance is ridiculous, she said. But I want to hear what you have to say. Iwa can throw their suspicions and accusations around all day for all I care. I'm not buying anything unless I hear it from someone I trust. Naruto quirked an eye at her. You trust me? Well, you did protect me from Roshi, so I'd say you've earned as much, Temari said, crossing her arms. It was just dark enough to hide the faint blush on her cheeks. Trust was a big deal in their line of work after all. I was only, yes, only getting me out of the way so you didn't have to hold back, she interrupted, rolling her eyes. Lamest excuse in the book, really. But whatever. We can discuss your apparent care for my well-being at a later date. Right now, all I want to know is what you think of the Iwa situation and how they believe you're the fourth Hokage's son. Naruto stared at Temari curiously. You don't trust them. You do. He shook his head. They will have an angle to play. Everyone does. Not sure what it is yet, he said. It wasn't like everyone wasn't already racking their minds trying to figure out what Iwa were up to. There had to be something going on here, surely. As for me being the fourth son, well, the only person who would know the truth about that is likely waiting for us in Konoha. Maybe everyone can pester him for answers instead of bothering me about it. Oh, can't even be honest with your wife. My, what a good start we are off to, Temari said, a playful smile on her face. Not even a hint. Naruto allowed a small smile. All things considered, Temari's more playful side was endearing. Never frequent enough to get on his nerves, nor so over the top as to annoy him. She was smart enough to have found a nice balance rather quickly, and that he could appreciate about her. Perhaps entertaining her curiosity in return wouldn't be such a bad thing. Would be an interesting note in the history books, he mused. The daughter of the fourth Kazekage, and the son of the fourth Hokage, what an interesting union that would be. He left it at that, leaving Temari to make up her mind on her own. Based on the smug look on her face, she had done just that. Let's get back. I don't want to hear what Kakashi has to say if he catches us returning from the forest together. Temari grimaced. Good thinking. With that, they both hurried back to camp. Sadly, they were too late, being greeted by Kakashi and Sakura, both of whom wouldn't stop giving the pair knowing glances. A long night indeed. Back out in the woods, far enough away from the camps to be noticed, Sasuke waited. He anxiously palmed a small piece of paper, checking it over and over to make sure he hadn't read it wrong. He hadn't. Someone else was out here, following them, following him. Whoever it was, they were good enough to not get spotted by Kakashi and the others, good enough to have found them in the first place, and skilled enough to get a message to him so discreetly. The spider that had crawled to him with the note was lucky to have not been dealt a swift death before Sasuke noticed its intentions, thankfully so. The contents of the note were, less than informative. A single, rather vague phrase. The power you seek. Sasuke didn't need to do much guesswork to figure out who had sent it. The mark on his shoulder ached in a way that forced him to remember that day during the Chunin exams. Orochimaru, the former elite shinobi of Konoha, one of the Sannin, a ruthless monster, and one of the few people possibly strong enough to go against Itachi. From there, the choice had been simple. Sasuke would hear out whoever it was that the snake had sent to persuade him. If it wasn't enough, he could simply kill them and move on. No one would bat an eye. But if it was good enough, you're interested. Good. Sasuke forced himself not to react to the voice. They didn't need to know that they had gotten the drop on him. He hadn't even heard any footsteps. Turning slowly, he was a little more alarmed to find himself facing not one, but 4 individuals. They each wore the headband of Otogakur, the village Sasuke knew to be under Orochimaru's rule, proving his suspicions right. I'll hear what you have to say, but that's it. Don't expect me to be easily swayed by words alone, Sasuke said. The apparent leader of the group, a slender androgynous-looking boy with blue hair, chuckled. Of course not. Actions would serve better. No. Perhaps you would like to get a taste of what power Orochimaru can provide to you. And how do you propose you'll prove that? I've already felt what the curse marked is, Sasuke said, rubbing his shoulder. It's not enough. The boy grinned, black marking spreading across his skin. Oh, this? He asked. This is only the beginning. The incomplete product. Lord Orochimaru is not so foolish as to bestow his gifts so thoughtlessly. Only with loyalty are his gifts truly given. What you have cannot compare to the true power provided by the mark. If you would only join us, we will unlock its full potential for you. Sasuke narrowed his eyes. Prove it. Not here. Not now, the boy said. Such a display wouldn't go unnoticed. Then when? Soon. Continue as you would normally. When the time is right, we will seek you out. Be ready. And if you tell anyone about us, you will be as good as dead. You suck as a Jinchuriki. Naruto gritted his teeth and tried his best to ignore the man standing over him. They were so close to Konoha now, no more than another day's travel. Why couldn't he have stayed silent like he had the whole trip so far? He closed his eyes and attempted to return to meditating, to no avail. The feeling of eyes on him was uncomfortable. Naruto might have been able to ignore the curious stares from his team and the rest of the Iwa team during his meditation moments, but he could not handle Roshi staring at him from such a close distance. The man also exuded an extremely unpleasant temperature, likely from his Kekkei Genkei. Had this mission taken place in the land of snow, then Naruto might have seen some use in having his fellow Jinchuriki around. Here, in the land of fire, it was much less welcome. Perhaps as an answer to his internal complaining, things only got worse. Roshi took it upon himself to drop into a seated position in front of Naruto, mirroring his meditative stance almost mockingly. Naruto groaned. What do you want? He asked pointedly, cracking a single eye open. Is that any way to talk to your elder? Naruto looked the man up and down. You are old, I'll give you that. Roshi laughed. Damn right I am, he said proudly. And how do you think someone like me managed to live all the years I have? Wasn't by being lucky, that much I'm sure you of all people understand. He patted his belly to make his point, giving Naruto a knowing look. I imagine this is the part where you tell me something about teamwork, trusting my comrades to have my back, and training like hell to control the fox. Naruto rolled his eyes. He had heard all that before, from the Hokage. It hadn't inspired him then, and it certainly wouldn't inspire him now. Save it for the next guy. Pretty sure there won't be a next guy, if things keep going the way they are, Roshi said. As for your comrades, he glanced over to where Kakashi was sitting with the others, they might as well be useless. Putting your faith in others will get you stabbed in the back or left for dead. From my experience anyway. No, you just need to stop being an idiot by trying to control the biju inside of you. Not how it works, I'm afraid, and until you realize that you'll just keep burning yourself up and walking out of every fight looking like a rotisserie chicken. Naruto grimaced. He didn't need that comparison to be made, nor did he need to see how the Tsuchikage perked up at the mention of chicken. Of course, because you are suddenly the expert on all the biju and their Jinchuriki. Don't control the chakra. That sounds like a great idea. Sitting off to the side, Temari had to wonder just what had happened during Naruto and Roshi's fight to make her husband so, sigh. Roshi nodded sagely. Ah, a smart. Living up to the Uzumaki name then. But before you get your panties in a twist over it, remember that I am currently the oldest Jinchuriki alive. I've got more years of experience than you have short and curlies. Only a fool would scoff at my offer to teach them. Naruto narrowed his eyes. Beating aside, he was really beginning to not like Roshi. Most of the old men he had the displeasure of knowing had the decency to only have one bad trait. Apparently, Iwa never got the memo on that. You never offered to teach me anything. Not while you're being a rude little shit about it, Roshi quipped, smirking at the boy. Show your elder some respect, and I might be willing to help you with your little fox problem, maybe, possibly, if I feel like it. Roshi, the Tsuchikage called out warningly. Don't you dare go sharing Iwa's secrets with the enemy. Roshi flipped the man off. Can it, you old fart? This is Jinchuriki business. Doesn't concern you. Onoki bristled at the blatant display of disrespect but didn't make another comment. Naruto was curious now. Shouldn't you show your cage respect? Yes, it was hypocritical of him to ask such a thing, and yes, Kakashi was staring at him funny. As soon as he can make up his mind quicker than a woman can choose an outfit, then I will respect him. Until then, he's just the same old fence sitter. Naruto sighed deeply. We're all old men, so weird. If you know so much, why aren't you a perfect Jinchuriki, like the one in Kumo? That may have only been a rumor, or even propaganda from Kumo's end, but it was still a valid question. The Kyuubi had urged Naruto that there was a greater unity between Jinchuriki and Biju than that which Roshi had displayed in their fight. Roshi's expression dropped as he grumbled something about cloud-headed freaks. Do you want the help or not, brat? I honestly couldn't care at this point. Why offer it then? Naruto asked. The man shrugged, and left it at that. Fine. What am I doing wrong? Naruto asked, finally giving up on getting any meditation done today. You're trying, Roshi said, as if that explained everything. The way he chuckled at Naruto's expression also wasn't helping much. First step of controlling a Biju, give up. Everyone within earshot gave the man a skeptical look. The Biju are living things. Age-old creatures of pure chakra. They can die and will themselves back together as if it were just another day. What exactly do you think a single human life is in comparison to that? Just how strong do you think you are compared to one of them? Roshi asked, smirking as he apparently got his answer from how Naruto stared blankly. Exactly. We're nothing. An annoying little speck of dust. So, how do you expect a speck of dust to be able to control something so much more than it could ever hope to be? You don't. You give up. Naruto stared for a good long minute, waiting for Roshi to elaborate. He didn't. I'm done with this, he finally said, getting up and marching away. There had to be somewhere he could get a few minutes of peace. Roshi watched him leave and snorted. He'll figure it out, probably. With that said, his attention quickly turned back to another interesting member of the traveling party. He grinned wide as the individual in question froze under his gaze, a very visible shiver running up her spine as she locked eyes with him. Kuretsuchi was annoying, and more than a little entitled, but she was a promising kunoichi of Iowa, and a Yoden user at that. Roshi had been dragged out of his retirement for a particular purpose, according to Onoki that was. Who was he to ignore such a lovely opportunity to pay his beloved leader back in kind? Making the girl a bigger pain in the would only be an unexpected side effect of his methods. Yes, very unexpected. Not many things could bring a shinobi village screeching to a halt. An invasion had proven to be one of them, though that was very short-lived. A Biju attack another. There was likely a handful of other events that could have brought much the same effect, but none of them came to mind for the group. As they made their way through the front gates of Konoha and began walking along its streets, it became apparent that the one truly effective way to bring a shinobi village to a halt was to march the leader of its greatest enemy right through the middle of it. Unbound at that too. Civilians gawked and swarmed at the visitors, all murmuring amongst themselves as to what could be going on. Shinobi kept their numbers spread out throughout the crowds, with more than a few taking vantage points from above. A message had been sent ahead of them to warn of the coming guest, but that seemed to have provided no buffer regarding the shock value. It made sense. Iowa had been Konoha's biggest threat in the last war. They had claimed more than their fair share of lives, and there were likely more than a few grudges held on both sides. For the Tsuchikage to invite himself into Konoha, with so little guard, presented many shinobi with many bright ideas on how to take revenge and claim glory for Konoha. Not that it would happen so publicly. The civilian populace, gods bless their souls, lived a peaceful life based on ignorance. If they didn't actively see the bloodshed, then they could pretend it wasn't happening around them. That was exactly how the villages tried to keep things too. In broad daylight, Onoki could breathe easily. Getting to the Hokage Tower was a slower process than normal. By the time they got there, everyone felt like every inch of them had been thoroughly inspected by far too many eyes. Even Onoki was unsettled by it. The only member not put off by the attention was Kakashi. Filing into the Hokage's office, they were met by the smiling old Hokage, flanked on either side by both Danzo and Tsunade respectfully. In the room with them were no less than 6 visible Anbu, with who knew how many hidden around in preparation. Onoki rolled his eyes and grumbled about Thankx. What a pleasant surprise, Lord Tsuchikage, Hiruzen began. Had I known you intended to attend yourself, I would have made more appropriate preparations. I apologize for our lacking on such short notice. Oh, yes, because clearly you are so lacking in security detail, Onoki said irritably. How about we skip this formal nonsense and get to the point? My back is killing me. I didn't travel all this way just to play at fancy words and underhanded jabs. Whilst everyone tensed at the short man's utter lack of respect or manners, Hiruzen merely chuckled at the display. Very well. What is it you deemed so urgent that you thought it wise to travel all the way here to Konoha? Onoki went to speak only to stop as a small pebble bounced off the side of his head. Roshi was making a point to look distinctly distracted by a painting hanging from a wall. Right. This is perhaps something best discussed in private, Sarutobi. Your 2 advisors are welcome to stay, but the rest can take a walk. With a silent gesture, the Anbu were dismissed. Kakashi, if you could please wait outside with your team. I will hear your report on the mission after and reward your team accordingly. Kakashi didn't need to be told twice. The less he heard, the less responsibility that would fall on his shoulders. The Jinchuriki stays, Onoki said firmly, eyeing Naruto. I'm afraid young Naruto is still a genin. He is not cleared for such a meeting, Hiruzen said. Onoki waved him off dismissively. Don't care. He stays. It's important. Hiruzen sighed deeply. Sharing a look with Kakashi, he nodded and the Jonin quickly complied by leaving with 2 of his genin, and Temari, in tow. Rubbing his temples, Hiruzen could already feel a headache forming. If the Shinigami took what was left of his soul in this moment, it would be a blessing. The 2 Jonin, along with Kuretsuchi, bowed respectfully before also departing, leaving only Roshi behind to defend their cage. Once the door closed, the mood changed considerably. Hiruzen's eyes darkened as he glared at Onoki, Tsunade and Danzo sharing in his expression. From his spot, slightly off to the side, Naruto felt the invisible weight bearing down on him. Being in a room with this many monsters was almost comparable to facing the Kyuubi when he was in a bad mood. Well, half dead and still capable of such an imposing presence. I'm impressed, Sarutobi, Onoki said, unfazed by the glares leveled his way. Why are you here, Onoki? Hiruzen asked. Is that any way to talk to an old friend? Konoha and Iowa are not friends, Danzo hissed. The Hokage has asked you a question. You will answer him. Onoki smirked. I'll get there when I'm good and ready. But first, I have a more important question for the 3 of you. He pointed to Naruto. What on earth is this? Tsunade blinked. A child, obviously. But whose child? Hiruzen's features hardened. Young Naruto is an orphan of the Kyuubi attack. He was chosen by the 4th too. Onoki snorted. Chosen? Do you honestly think anyone is so foolish as to believe such a lie? He spat. You and I both know that Namikaze was many things, but he was not the sort of man to condemn a no-name child to such a fate. Far too soft-hearted for such a thing. He paused to look at Naruto intently for a moment, only to turn away with a frown. Obvious similarities aside, I know Namikaze was expecting a child, with an Uzumaki woman no less. If you intended on his identity to remain a secret, you should have at least tried to make it so. There was a tense silence that was only interrupted by an indignant grunt from Danzo. I told you, the bandaged man muttered under his breath. The small smile on his face looked far too out of place. Hiruzen ignored everyone in favor for keeping his eyes on Naruto. He had been watching the boy carefully the whole time, since the moment he had entered his office. What he had learned through that observation was not as comforting as he hoped it would be. Naruto, how long have you known? He asked gently. It had been obvious enough when Naruto failed to blurt out anything concerning the matter. Onoki wasn't the kind to wait to stir up trouble. If the opportunity to sow the seeds of doubt was there, Onoki would take it. With their days of travel, there was no way Naruto was not aware of the Tsuchikage's umption regarding his parentage. The fact that the boy was so quiet right now only confirmed one of his greatest fears. Naruto stared blankly at the Hokage. I don't know anything, he said. I'm just a Jinchuriki, a loyal shinobi of Konoha. Whatever I might know about who my parents were doesn't mean anything. If it was important, you would have told me. Right, old man. Hiruzen flinched. He could have sworn he felt himself age considerably in that moment. From beside him he could sense both Danzo and Tsunade glaring at him, albeit for different reasons. Tsunade was likely mad that the lies and cover-ups had been allowed to go on for so long, only to come back to bite them in the. Danzo was probably still upset that he hadn't been given permission to take Naruto into the root system, where he would be trained and hidden from the world until he was ready. Both had valid reasons to be upset, and yet neither voiced their opinion. For that, Hiruzen was grateful. The way Naruto was looking at him right now was more than enough pain for one day. Naruto, we're here for an alliance, Roshi announced, clearing his throat loudly. Everyone's attention snapped back to Onoki, with Hiruzen offering Naruto one last solemn glance before turning back to the more pressing matter. Whether he liked it or not, Naruto could wait. He wasn't going anywhere, and now wasn't the best time to come clean with everything. An alliance? He asked, gesturing for Onoki to elaborate. Yes, an alliance, Onoki said, narrowing his eyes at Roshi. One born out of necessity more than want, I imagine. Danzo mused. Onoki frowned. Instead of rising to the barb, he pulled a rolled-up piece of cloth from his pouch and let it unfurl before him. It was a piece of black fabric, torn from a larger article, with a red cloud printed on it. Suddenly, everything was starting to make a little more sense. What do you know of Akatsuki? Temari paced anxiously up and down the small hallway outside the Hokage's office, glancing at the door every time she pet it. There was no way this was going to turn out good. She had hoped, rather morbidly perhaps, that Konoha would seize the opportunity to simply kill the Tsuchikage as soon as he stepped foot in the village. That may have been too high a hope. Konoha were known for their peace-first approach to almost everything. Temari's current circumstances being testament to that. Sadly, that only served to spur on her concerns. It was no secret that Suna and Iwa were bitter enemies, possibly even more so than Konoha and Iwa. Their constant political bickering and small-scaled battles over what amounted to petty squabbles had continued even after the Third War had ended. Peace between the two great villages was likely not something that would just come about in her lifetime. And yet, here she was, waiting outside while the very first attempt at peace talks occurred between the Tsuchikage and the Hokage. With Suna being as entwined with Konoha as it now found itself, there was no possibility they could weasel their way out of a treaty without significantly damaging their own pride and reputation. Though Temari did wonder if taking such a loss would be seen as a better alternative to being dragged into an alliance with Iwa by Konoha. There were likely more than a few who would see it as an unavoidable choice. The only question would be how Konoha reacted, or how important their alliance with Suna actually was. Temari wasn't fooled. If the choice came between Iwa and Suna, Konoha had to choose the former. Economically, militaristically, hell even just geographically, Iwa was the better alliance to have. Not to mention that they were the only one of the two that proved to be any form of threat to Konoha. Suna had been humiliated in that regard. So yes, Temari was stressed. Knowing that whatever was going on behind that closed door could determine a political shift in the world that she would likely be caught up in was simply too much for her to think about. The all too amused look on Kuretsuchi's face wasn't helping none either. You really ought to calm down, Kuretsuchi said with a smirk. All that stress will only age you faster than the desert already has. Temari ignored her and continued pacing. Temari, maybe you should relax. Just a little bit. I'm sure everything is fine, Sakura said softly, though she too appeared somewhat concerned about the nature of the meeting going on without them. With an unsure frown, she turned to her sensei. Right, Kakashi-sensei. Kakashi's one eye was fixated on the door, unnervingly so. I honestly can't say, he admitted. Temari clicked her tongue. That was annoyingly unhelpful. You lot worry too much, Kuretsuchi said flippantly. It's not like we're here to cause trouble. Bullshit, Temari snapped. Kuretsuchi smirked. It's the truth. I promise, she said. Grandfather desires an alliance. That is all. We have a common enemy to consider, after all. That got everyone's attention. Kumo, Kakashi suggested. Sasuke narrowed his eyes but remained silent. Akatsuki? Temari asked. Kuretsuchi grinned at her. I'm surprised anyone from Suna would know of them, what with all your heads being stuck in the sand. Temari crossed her arms. Bitch. What does Aiwa have to do with Akatsuki? Kakashi asked. Not a lot. Not yet. But that will change in time. They aim to capture all of the nine-tailed beasts, which makes them everyone's enemy, doesn't it? Such a bold claim cannot simply go unchallenged. Kakashi hummed thoughtfully. Then why not ally with Kumo? They also hold a grudge against Konoha, to some extent. You each possess two Jinchuriki of formidable strength and ability in controlling their Biju. Surely, they would have been a better choice, no? Kuretsuchi shrugged. You would think so. I didn't think Aiwa would ever stoop so low as to ally with anyone openly, Temari said. What happened? Suddenly lose your sense of superiority. Such brave words coming from a Suna rat. Tell me, what did your precious village have to sacrifice to earn the privilege of crawling back into Konoha's good graces? Must have been something valuable. To secure an alliance so quickly after failing to invade. I can only imagine what Konoha was allowed to pry from your desperate fingers. As she spoke, Kuretsuchi's eyes never left Temari. They were piercing, intense, as if searching for something. By the frown that quickly found itself on her face, she didn't find what she was looking for. Much to everyone's surprise, it was Sakura who spoke up. She thinks we took Suna's Jinchuriki. Everyone turned to her, eliciting Sakura to blush from the sudden attention. Oh, sorry. It just makes sense. Aiwa and Kumo are the only two villages with two Jinchuriki, aside from Kiri, who we know would never ally with Aiwa again after last time. Kuretsuchi and the two Jonin grimaced at the mention of their village's sordid past. If they won't ally with Kumo, then they don't see them as a threat either. Konoha would be considered a threat, if only because of the war, but with the fourth Hokage gone, and only one Jinchuriki to our name, then we are still a little behind. Unless, we were able to claim another Jinchuriki, say by way of a recent alliance. Kakashi couldn't have looked prouder, without taking off his mask that was, as he nodded to Sakura. I'm glad at least one of my precious genin knows the importance of history and logical thinking. Sakura blushed at the compliment and Kakashi turned a curious eye back to Kuretsuchi. Regrettably, I do hope that she is wrong, this time. If Aiwa have only come to neutralize the threat of a Konoha that wields two Jinchuriki, then you will be sorely disappointed. Kuretsuchi's once smug and confident aura fizzled. You mean, Konoha didn't claim the Aikibi for themselves? She was met with blank stares, even from the genin, as if to ask, why would we do that? Kuretsuchi looked back at Temari, who was now the smug one in this little game. But then, what did Suna offer for forgiveness? The way Temari smiled made Kuretsuchi regret asking. Naruto wanted to be anywhere but here. Anywhere. Even locked away in a cage under the Hokage Tower, with the key tossed away, would have been better than sitting in on this cursed meeting. He understood the importance of said meeting, and even how he was no doubt going to factor into it. That meant very little when he knew that his opinion or wishes on the matter were of no consequence. Just like his marriage, a decision would be made for him, and he would be expected to keel to their demands. He had gotten used to that part at least, but was there really any reason to force him to sit through this torture? Could they not just brief him on the outcome via a message? His attention wavered in and out as the meeting dragged on. With any luck, Temari was having a more pleasant time waiting outside. Naruto idly contemplated what he would eat afterwards. What food did they have at home? Would they just grab something on their way home? Maybe one of them would cook. Oh well, they could figure it out later. It wasn't as if they. Naruto froze. He scowled at the realization that he had been working Temari into his life a little bit too seamlessly. Not to say it should have been difficult. Temari made a point of being the easiest person to work around, live with, and just generally be around. She had a lot of practice with a lot worse, Naruto figured. That didn't make it any better for him though. There was a reason he kept people at a distance and Temari was making it difficult. Everyone else he could justify keeping at arm's length. Be it by their own actions, or by oceation. Nobody in Konoha could be trusted, not truly. Naruto had learned as much. Sure, they could be friendly when they needed to be, helpful even, some even going out of their way to try and befriend him in some way. Kakashi was the most annoying of that particular bunch. Nothing ever seemed to get under the man's skin, and he always popped back up unperturbed by anything Naruto said or did. Even his actions in Wave, or how had handled the Chunin exams, had done nothing to dissuade his sensei. The man was infuriating, and had he not been a Konoha shinobi, Naruto might almost give in just to gain some peace. Temari was different, however. She wasn't from Konoha. He couldn't lump her in with everyone else here, couldn't outright disregard her as just another person in the village. Naruto had tried, at first. It didn't work. Temari was too sincere and honest with everything she said and did. And then there was her connection to Gaara. She knew what Naruto was, what he was capable of, had even been on the receiving end of it to some extent, and still she refused to look at him any differently. It was comforting. Almost too comforting. It would have made so much more sense if she was just another Konoha ninja trying to cement his loyalty to the village. That much he could have understood and ignored. You have a soft spot for the girl. Naruto withheld a groan. He did not need the commentary right now. She confuses you, the fox said. With all she has seen, all she has lived through her brother, she is the only one who you think deserves to hate you, fear you. And yet, she does not. Your point. Naruto had a sinking feeling in his stomach. The Kyuubi was not usually this invested in what Naruto felt or thought unless it was detrimental to his growth. The Kyuubi chuckled. She gives you hope. If she doesn't care about what you are, if she could grow to care about you, despite everything, then perhaps others could too. She gives you hope that there are better people in the world than just what you have seen in this village. Naruto frowned. Was that it? Was that what was wrong with him lately? Surely not. He couldn't be that weak. He didn't need hope. He didn't need acceptance. He didn't need Temari. Right. Hope is a powerful thing. Even you are not spared from its allure. I'll fix this. Perhaps. But hope is not always such a terrible thing. It may work to your advantage. Then what are you trying to? Naruto. He focused back on the meeting, noticing that everyone was now looking at him. Is everything okay? The Hokage asked softly. I'm fine. Roshi laughed. Little brat is just being pestered by the fox, he said. The Biju don't really care for picking their moments. If they want to talk, they will be heard. Naruto and Roshi shared a quick look before Naruto sighed and turned back to the Hokage. Did you need something? Hiruzen's expression softened. Lord Tsuchikage wanted to know if there was anything you could tell them about your interaction with Akatsuki. Nothing that isn't already in the report, he said, crossing his arms. That day was not a good memory he wanted to delve back into so carelessly. Ha, guess you got your whiny little ass kicked by them too, Roshi teased. Don't worry. There's no shame in only being a half-baked Jinchuriki. Naruto seethed and silenced the raging screams of the Kyuubi. Losing his cool in the Hokage's office was a surefire way to get his seal tightened, or worse, end up restrained somewhere. Whatever contingency plans Hiruzen and Danzo had lined up for him were best left hidden away. Like you could do any better, he shot back at Roshi. Roshi smiled, but the expression caught Naruto off guard. It wasn't a happy or smug kind of smile. You're right, I couldn't, he admitted. It was all I could do to snag that piece of their cloak and get back to Iowa in one piece. Even then, I needed help. You have people capable of combating Akatsuki. Danzo asked, his interest now piqued. Roshi clarified. I was not alone when Akatsuki came looking. Han, Jinchuriki of the Gobi, was training alongside me in the hopes that we might better harness the power of our Biju. Now that I think about it, said training is likely what led Akatsuki straight to us. Hiruzen nodded. You were the only one to escape, he said solemnly. Danzo scoffed. 2 seasoned Jinchuriki weren't enough to handle 2 ordinary shinobi. You'd best mind your tone when talking about my fallen soldiers, Onoki said sharply. Had Han not given his life so bravely, this meeting would not be happening right now. A meeting that you still have yet to completely explain the reason for, Tsunade cut in. You say you want an alliance. Am I to understand this would only be a temporary effort to deal with Akatsuki? Once that threat is dealt with, Iowa will simply scurry back to its own ways, if not use the time of truce to strategically weaken your future enemy. Your being here, as per your own words, is only a result of you already losing 1 Jinchuriki. Let's be real, you are only looking to take advantage of our good nature to get us to help you keep hold of what little power you still have. I think what my dear student is trying to say, is that this is not something we can agree to lightly, Hiruzen said. Tsunade shrugged. Whatever. It's not my decision yet. Thank the gods for that, Roshi grumbled. You have something to say. Roshi waved her off. Nothing that would interest someone who buys her perfume at a liquor store. I could smell you from the street. Hiruzen rested his face in his hands. Here we go. As the meeting descended into a petty argument, Naruto receded back into his mind. The usually oppressive aura that the Kyuubi gave off was disturbingly weak at the moment. He got close to the bars of the seal, peering through the darkness curiously before peering through. It had been a long time since Naruto and the Kyuubi had developed a good enough relationship that there was no risk of harm from entering the beast's cage, though it was still a rare occurrence. The fox appreciated its personal space, and Naruto was happy to comply with that. It helped that being too close to the fox was often challenging even at the best of times, which made now all the more peculiar. Kokuo. What? That was their name. The Gobi. Kokuo, the Kyuubi said, its voice almost sad. To think I will not even sense when they are taken from this world. This cage is much crueler than I had first thought. Naruto found himself suddenly very aware of his being within the seal. If there was ever a time for the fox to change its mind and try to rip its way out, now would be it. He swallowed hard. Can we do anything? The Kyuubi opened its eyes and stared at Naruto, the silence doing little to ease Naruto's concerns. He trusted the fox, more than anyone else he knew, but Naruto also understood that if their places were switched, he would do almost anything to get his freedom. How and why they even had as friendly of a relationship was still something Naruto wasn't sure about. Pity was the most likely answer, or perhaps a pet project born out of boredom. Living for centuries would probably do strange things to a being's morals and motivations. There was no telling what was truly going through the Kyuubi's head. You must train, the beast said. Kokuo was not weak, even amongst our kin. If this Akatsuki could so easily take them and their host, then we have much to do before you are ready to defend yourself. Where do we start? Naruto asked. The Kyuubi grumbled to itself. It might be time that I talk to the monkey again, it said. Ask the Jinchuriki for guidance. He seemed well versed in how to harness such power. Naruto's mood soured. Really? Him? He didn't get an answer. In a blink he was back in the Hokage's office, the argument still ongoing. Were all powerful shinobi this childish, or was it just that childish people always somehow became powerful? If the latter were the case, then Naruto was screwed. Maybe in another lifetime. Ignoring what was being said, Naruto walked up to Roshi, and without a word, grabbed the man's arm. He didn't know if that was enough for the Biju to communicate, but it had worked with Gaara, so it was worth a shot. From the way Roshi froze mid-insult, it seemed to do the trick. Everyone went quiet and watched on curiously. Train me, Naruto said. As much as the man annoyed him, it would be stupid to pee up the opportunity. He and the Kyuubi had more or less plateaued with the chakra shroud training anyway, so it couldn't hurt to get an outside perspective. Roshi appeared to zone out for a second before blinking in surprise. Okay. I didn't agree to this. Onoki spluttered. Sorry. Someone much bigger and scarier than you asked me, Well, demanded more like it, Roshi said, giving Naruto a weird look. Is he always that well-tempered? Naruto shrugged. Fair enough. Roshi turned to the now very intrigued Hokage and council. Ally with us and I will personally east in training the brat to be more than just a hard-to-kill punching bag. Outside of that, you can hash the details out with the old fart here and let me know which ones affect me. Now, if you would excuse us, I'm going to see what I might be working with. The old Jinchuriki offered a flippant wave as he walked to the door, only stopping to look back expectantly at Naruto and gesturing for him to follow. Naruto turned to the Hokage questioningly. Even if he hadn't been a shinobi, his life still belonged to the old man. There was only so much he could risk doing without the Hokage's permission before it started drawing too much attention. Being trained by a rival village's Jinchuriki was very likely somewhere near the top of that list. As such, he was surprised when the old man smiled and gestured for him to follow. Danzo seemed a bit less enthusiastic, but that was to be expected. There would be eyes watching them, not that that was much of a change from the norm. Now it was just a question of how much Roshi could offer him, if anything at all. Anything was better than being stuck in the meeting. It was late when Naruto finally got home. His feet dragged across the floor sluggishly, leaving a trail of dirt as he went. He tried to be quiet, somewhat, knowing that Temari was likely asleep already. The poor girl hadn't been as lucky as he had been in escaping the suffering that was formalities with the Hokage. She and the rest of Team 7 had been left to deal with the Iowa situation without him. Though now that he thought about it, the meetings might have been less painful. He fell onto the lounge with a groan, burying his face into the only soft thing he had felt all night. That bad, huh? A single eye cracked open, staring tiredly at Temari. She was curled up on another chair, hair down, dressed in only a large baggy shirt and shorts, a book in hand. How had he not noticed her? He couldn't be that tired. A muffled grunt into the pillow under his face was the best he could offer. Temari smiled. I'll take that as a yes, she said, closing her book and sitting up a little. Did you want to know how everything went after you left? Is that why you're still awake? Naruto asked, lethargically crawling into a slouched seated position. Partially, she admitted. I did want to make sure you were not left out of the loop on everything, just in case. Although, I do have other reasons to wait for my dear husband's return home. Naruto tilted his head questioningly at her. Temari sighed but kept her smile. To make sure you got home safe, she elaborated with a bit of amusement. Oh, she laughed softly. You're hopeless at this. Her tone was gentle as she shook her head. We can practice that later, I guess. For now, you should know that Konoha and Iowa are officially engaged in peace talks. An alliance is being written up as we speak for consideration. A message was sent to Suna for them to voice their opinion on the matter, though I have a good idea of what their response will be. For obvious reasons, the Tsuchikage is very interested in you, and me too I suppose, by association. His granddaughter seemed a bit disappointed when I told her about our arrangement. Temari pursed her lips in thought for a moment, only to shake it from her mind. Naruto didn't have to wonder what that thought had been. He may not have been as smart as the likes of Temari or Shikamaru, but he could read the writing on the wall. With his lineage under scrutiny, and the Tsuchikage desiring to ensure an alliance, there was a very clear motive for the old man to drag his granddaughter along. Naruto shuddered. He never thought the day would come that he was actually grateful to be married to Temari, and so soon after the fact at that. At least Suna wasn't out to try and claim a Jinchuriki, or a very specific bloodline. Temari noticed his reaction. My thoughts exactly, she said. Anyway, other than playing the guessing game of motives and reasonings, the whole thing has been a very bland affair. You didn't miss much. How about yourself? Anything I should know about this training? Her eyes asked him up and down, taking in the sight of his exhaustion, ripped and burnt clothing, and more than a few spots of dried blood. Naruto grimaced. He said. An understatement if there ever were one. The beatdown on their first meeting was a blessing compared to what Roshi referred to as training. At least back then Roshi was quick to knock him out. Now, he actively avoided causing any injury that might cut the session short, all the while inflicting as much pain as possible with each strike. So far, they had done nothing but fight, with Roshi insisting that he needed to see Naruto's limits. They had fought, Naruto using anything and everything he could, save for the Kyuubi's chakra itself, until he simply couldn't anymore. By the end, Naruto was sure the only thing keeping him standing was the ever-present trickle of the Kyuubi's chakra. But he's strong. Really strong, Naruto continued. Even if they are scheming, if I can learn anything about being a Jinchuriki from him, it'll be worth it. And I can help you learn to be a person, Temari offered cheekily. Naruto snorted, a small smile fighting to appear. Right. The soft spot. Just as the Kyuubi had said. That was bad. It was just so difficult. Temari was the first person to treat him like a normal person with no ulterior motive behind it. Well, she wanted the marriage to work for the sake of her village, but she had been very upfront about that part, so Naruto didn't consider it an issue. She could have gone about that easily without having to get too involved with him. A simple discussion and an agreement of how to act in public in her mission would be resolved. Yet she had chosen to try the more hands-on approach, for whatever reason. That was fine. Naruto didn't mind her efforts nearly as much as anyone else's. She was honest, at least. One of the greatest gifts given to him as the host of the Kyuubi also happened to be one of the greatest curses. Being able to sense negative emotions, and to some extent, ill intent. As a child, it had been miserable. Surrounded by people that you knew hated you, feared you, were disgusted by you, was as close to a living hell as anyone could get. Being able to tell when someone's smile was nothing more than a facade, that their intentions were not what they seemed. Sure, it had helped occasionally, like with Mizuki, but it was a painful existence. Not knowing the bliss of ignorance, always peering deeper into everything, searching for the hidden darker meaning behind every interaction. Look underneath the underneath, as Kakashi would say. If only his sensei knew just how easy it was for Naruto to see such things. Even those that possessed no ill will, no festering harsh feelings for him, they were all kept at a safe distance. The Hokage, Jiraiya, Kakashi, even his teammates to some level. None of them hated him, none of them seemed to truly fear him. Still, their actions, their words, it was all wrong. They were nice, helpful, kind even. More tolerant of Naruto than anyone else, that was for sure. But they had reason to be. Naruto knew the ploy. A Jinchuriki without a leash was too dangerous to have around. They wanted to be the reason for his loyalty, the warmth he clung to. That absurd will of fire they preached about too often. Even if they did truly care about him, it was overshadowed by their love for the village. Konoha came first, always. Over anything and everyone. In their eyes, Naruto was a Jinchuriki first. He was their weapon, their tool to try and point against their enemies. Naruto was sure of it, as was the Kyuubi. That was why he was so careful. So long as he didn't let any of them in, then it couldn't be used against him, and he couldn't be forced to be their weapon. Not truly, not completely. Temari wasn't one of them. He could sense it. Speckles of fear existed in her, understandably. She was cautious, but she looked at him different. Temari didn't care about what he was, how he could be used. She hadn't come here with any of that in mind. It was in moments like this that Naruto truly realized just how different Temari was. As he sat there, silently trying not to give in to his own amusement, he couldn't feel anything from her. It was silent, truly silent, peaceful. She didn't feel negatively about him, nor did she harbor ill will against him. She was exactly what she offered, and that gave Naruto hope. That was the soft spot. Naruto took a deep breath. The house was beginning to smell like her. He wasn't complaining. At some point he would have to wonder if anything about Temari didn't help to calm his mind. He offered her a small smile, which was easier said than done for someone who actively avoided expressions. You'll have your work cut out for you. Temari blinked at him owlishly before smiling softly. Didn't I already tell you? I'm not afraid of hard work, she said. Her eyes quickly turned to the trail of dirt he had trekked through the house. You're cleaning that up yourself though. Just in case you were getting any ideas. He shook his head and made to get up and clean his mess. Tomorrow, Temari said. Clean it tomorrow. You need to sleep. She was up and by his side far too quickly. Come on. He didn't fight her when she led him by the hand to the bathroom door. He was too tired, or he just didn't feel like it. Either option was fine. She stopped, and for once Naruto actually found himself feeling awkward. What was she waiting for? Temari was staring at him strangely, as if she wanted to ask something. She didn't. It was a short-lived moment, thankfully. Temari smiled and took a step back. Good night, she said before turning and disappearing to her own room. Naruto scratched his head and frowned. Good night, he murmured, knowing she wouldn't hear him say it. Soft spot indeed. On the other side of the village, Sasuke fell to his knees panting. The ghost town that was the Uchiha district was a blessing for the moment. No one came here, not past the boundaries. It was still technically clan grounds, so long as Sasuke lived. No one could come in without his or the Hokage's permission. That meant no nosy do-gooders could come stumbling into his current predicament, which suited him just fine. No one needed to know what he was doing. Satisfied yet, Sasuke glared up at the two-headed boy standing over him. The black markings slowly receded from his skin as he offered a hand down to the Uchiha. Sasuke took it, getting back to his feet as he observed the others of the group. They had infiltrated Konoha easily enough, something which they apparently had experience with from the attempted invasion. That was a point towards them, or perhaps just a point towards Orochimaru himself. The man would know many of Konoha's secrets, so it made sense. And that is only a taste, Sakin said. The level 1 curse seal, which you have already experienced firsthand, is only the beginning of what gifts our Lord can bestow. You've felt what it can do, you've seen how we have been trained. Orochimaru does not seek out the weak. He desires only those with the utmost potential, and you have caught his eye in several ways. Consider it an honor, and a blessing. He offers to you, not only his tutelage, but the promise to uplift you to the heights you desire. Sasuke grunted. At the cost of my freedom. Sakin laughed. You are a sworn shinobi of Konoha. What freedom do you truly have right now? He asked. You must obey your cage, do as you are told, be restricted as they deem fit. Lord Orochimaru asks only that you aid him when it is asked of you. So long as you continue to grow strong, and perform the tasks given to you, your life is your own under his rule. He cares not for chained animals. True loyalty is earned through trust. Our Lord understands this better than any hidden village ever will. Absent-mindedly, he rubbed his shoulder, feeling the dull ache of the curse mark burn under the containment seal. All that power, that strength, just in reach, and yet kept from him. Why did Konoha feel it their right to take that away from him? Who were they to keep him stunted, to impede his progress? Or was that the idea all along? A weak Uchiha was a loyal Uchiha, easily strung along by empty promises and half measures of training, or so they thought. Arrogant old fools, the lot of them. Sasuke didn't care about the village, about being a shinobi. All that mattered was gaining the power to avenge his clan. If Orochimaru was willing to give him that, then no one had the right to deny him. Can we just go already? The red-headed girl of the group snapped. The longer we stick around, the harder this shit is going to be. Patience, Tayuya, Sakin chided, turning to Sasuke with a deceptively gentle smile. We will be back in 5 days. Make your decision by then. And please, think carefully. This offer is not made lightly, and our Lord will not offer it again. Changing your mind later will incur a heavy cost from you to be permitted even a fraction of the generosity you are receiving now. Till then, Sasuke. He watched them leave, disappearing into the night as if they were never there at all. Sasuke grunted. 5 days. He didn't need 5 days. His mind was made up already. He needed that power, and more. There was no other choice to be made. But at least he had time to plan, time to prepare. Konoha wouldn't just accept him running off to one of their missing nin. They would try to stop him, just like they tried to limit him, to contain him. No longer. His life was his own, and he would accomplish his duty to his family. Sasuke headed home. There was much he had to do. He was already free, Konoha just didn't know it yet.